Part 9. After telling the rest that he was going to the washroom, Quince Larson made a quick call to his grandpa, Joseph Larson. During the call, he told his grandpa that Yvette Larson had bought a new house number 1 Pacific Heights. Earlier on, Joseph Larson had declared that he would never go to Yvette Larson's house. But now, he had to swallow those words. This was all because it was number 1 Pacific Heights. What did that mean? It was the most prestigious property in all of San Francisco. Now that number 1 Pacific Heights belonged to a Larson, there was no way Joseph Larson was going to give up this chance to look at it. After returning from the washroom, Quince Larson steered the conversation in a certain direction. Very quickly, they got to the question of how the family had bought this house. Yvette Larson, how did your family get so much money to buy this house? You know everyone here, don't hide such good opportunities from us. Quince Larson's question drew everyone's attention. That's right, everyone knows that number 1 Pacific Heights is terribly expensive. How had Yvette Larson managed to afford it? If she's willing to share her tips with us, we might just be able to get rich too even if we can't earn as much as her. As expected, they've gotten to this question. If I tell the truth, nobody will believe me. It seems like we'll have to lie. Yvette Larson was in a dilemma. We won the lottery. Unfortunately, Yvette Larson was now dealing with the elites of different industries, not Linda James. The lottery? That's impossible. I work for the pool. If anyone won so much money to buy this villa, there's no way I wouldn't have known. The one who had spoken was Jennifer James. She was a classmate of Yvette Larson's and had called out the latter's lie. What do you mean by this, Yvette Larson? It's rare that I'm asking you about something. Do you think that it's very inconvenient to answer me, so you're even lying to me now? Quince Larson ruthlessly humiliated his cousin. So what if you have money? I want you to know that you've betrayed your family. I want the entire Larson family to know that you're a traitor. Yvette Larson was in a frenzy in the face of such accusations. Her hand was as cold as ice. Finn Taylor grabbed her hand to give her some warmth. Quince Larson, this is our house. How dare you start making a din here? Quince Larson was stunned. This was the first time Finn Taylor had ever confronted him, and he was doing so in front of so many other people. Do you think I'll allow myself to be trampled on? Finn Taylor, who are you? I'm the Larson family's eldest grandson, but you're only a useless matrilocal son-in-law. You're in no place to speak to me. I'm only here out of respect for your family. Do you really think you can boss me around? Quince Larson and Finn Taylor were head to head, and neither was willing to give in to the other. Just then, Uncle Sam walked over. He walked up to Finn Taylor and whispered, "Master, Joseph Larson is at the midpoint of the hill. He can't come up." Although he had whispered that, Quince Larson had overheard their conversation. He smiled inwardly because his grandpa was here. As long as grandpa is here, Yvette Larson can dream on about having it easy. All right, I understand, Finn Taylor replied before looking at Quince Larson. Aren't you going to pick him up? Since it was Quince Larson who had called him here, Finn Taylor couldn't be bothered to pick the old master up. He believed that the former would go even if he didn't. No, Finn Taylor, isn't this your house? Shouldn't you go pick him up? Hey, when I invited Grandpa here, he said he wasn't going to come. I didn't even know that he was coming. I think you'd better go pick him up. Finn Taylor remained indifferent and tried to stay out of the matter. But that infuriated Quince Larson. Still, he had no other choice. After all, he was the one who had asked his grandpa to come. If he didn't go to pick his grandpa up, the latter would definitely blame him for it. As for Finn Taylor, he would definitely be able to get himself out of that situation. Left with no other choice, Quince Larson decided to head down the hill. Of course, it was no mean feat. On the way here, he had gone up the hill on a bus. But now that he was going down, he was relying on nothing more than his own legs. Quince Larson grumbled as he picked his grandpa up. Joseph Larson wanted to scold someone too. I'm already advanced in age, yet they are asking me to climb up the hill. I can barely catch my breath. The duo lashed out at Finn Taylor in their hearts and made the arduous journey up to number 1 Pacific Heights. Right at that moment, Finn Taylor strolled out of the villa. The moment he saw his grandpa, he put on such an exaggerated surprised look that everyone knew it was fake. Wow, Grandpa, why are you here? Didn't you say that you weren't coming? Sigh, Grandpa, you should have called me if you were coming. I could have sent a car down to fetch you. Quince Larson, I'm not trying to say anything about you, but didn't you know that Grandpa was coming? Since you already knew about it, why didn't you tell me? You wanted Grandpa to walk up, didn't you? I'm telling you that I won't let you off if anything happens to Grandpa because of this. Finn Taylor viciously lashed out at Quince Larson. Still, there was nothing the latter could do. I can't possibly admit that I'm a traitor who told on others. If I do, I'll be humiliated. Joseph Larson felt hatred rise up in his heart. He naturally knew full well that Finn Taylor was the one who had planned for him to walk up without a car, but he had no evidence to prove it. As such, he had no choice but to swallow that grievance. Joseph Larson found himself a seat to catch his breath. As his heart rate returned to normal, he glanced around the villa and nodded repeatedly. Good, this is great. Yvette, I'm really proud of you that you were able to buy number 1 Pacific Heights for the Larson family. Joseph Larson pointed at the villa and said, My ancestors, are you looking at this? The Larson family has made our mark. As the Larson family head, I've led the family this far. The whole of San Francisco will see just who the Larson family is. Dad, when you brought the Larson family out from the Sanders family, I bet you'd never dreamed that our family would ever move into number 1 Pacific Heights. Yvette, you're the most familiar with this place. Hurry up and tell me where we should put our shrine for our ancestors. Oh right, there must be a separate spot for the late old master, Hugo Larson. I think that room looks good. What do you think? Joseph Larson was going to move their ancestral shrine into number 1 Pacific Heights. Both Finn Taylor and Yvette Larson were rendered speechless. We've never once seen this happen in our entire lives. His grandchild has just bought a new house, and as a grandpa, he's going to move the ancestral shrine to his grandchild's house. How disgusting. Grandpa, don't you think that you should discuss this with us first? Yvette Larson couldn't hold it in any longer and expressed her dissatisfaction. However, her rebuttal caused a stir amongst the Larson family. Quince Larson was the first to speak up. Yvette, what do you mean? Are you saying that you're going to go against Grandpa? Eleanor Larson's face was filled with fear and confusion. You're refusing, Yvette, don't tell us that you're disowning your ancestors just because you're rich now. Frederick Larson and Franklin Larson butted in as well. I say, brother, you'd better say something. This is your house. If you don't want to acknowledge your ancestors, you'd better leave the Larson family. That's right, you should leave. Anyway, your family is so rich that you can buy number 1 Pacific Heights. Your ancestors shouldn't mean anything to your family anyway. Going against her ancestors, that was the picture the entire Larson family was trying to paint of Yvette Larson. They wanted everyone to know that Yvette Larson's family were people who went against their ancestors. Hillary Stone sneered, Ancestors, in my opinion, it's true that they won't have much feelings for them since there are so many generations between them anyway. But the late old master Hugo Larson is different. Finn Taylor, Hugo Larson was the one who introduced you and Yvette to each other. It's only because of him that you were able to marry into the Larson family. Don't you think that you should save the late old master in your spot now that you've gotten a new house? Whoosh, everyone's eyes were glued to Finn Taylor. Finn Taylor clenched his fist, his blood boiling. This is the house that I had bought from my wife, but the Larson family is trying to disgust us by moving the whole family shrine here. Grandpa, we'll get the late old master a good burial site. Our family can also pay for a crematorium to be built. Must you move the late old master's ashes into our house? Finn Taylor drew ire from the Larson family. Quince Larson said coldly, What do you mean, Finn Taylor? Do you think so poorly of the Larson family that you think we don't even have money for a burial site or crematorium? Of course, we have money for that. We just don't have that much money for such a nice house like number 1 Pacific Heights. You said earlier that this is your new house with Yvette. Since the late old master was the one who brought both of you together, I don't understand why you're being so heartless. Quince Larson accused Finn Taylor's family of being heartless. However, the latter didn't want such taboo items in his new house. Is there anything wrong with that? Forget it, let's go. They don't even want to acknowledge their ancestors. Do you think they'd acknowledge such poor relatives like us? That's right, Yvette, I've finally seen your true colors. I never thought you were such a person. With that, Quince Larson stood to leave. Everyone else followed closely behind. Just like that, the entire Larson family was gone. Of course, Yvette Larson's classmates dared not stay any longer now that things had progressed to this stage. One by one, they found their own excuses to leave. The couple had planned an elaborate housewarming party, but it had ended just like that. Yvette Larson and her husband stood by the pond in the back garden. Yvette Larson spoke up, Finn, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that the Larson family would do that either. Today, Yvette Larson had truly been amazed by how shameless the Larson family was. To be honest, she felt embarrassed to be a Larson. However, Finn Taylor hadn't taken the matter to heart. It's okay. He really thought nothing of that matter. They're just fools making a fool of themselves. It's only out of respect for my wife that I haven't dealt with the Larson family. Otherwise, given my status, those people would already be dead. However, they still have blood relations with Yvette. I can kill them whenever I like. When Yvette wants to, I can get rid of those people for her at any time. I will just leave them be for now. Let's go out for a walk. Although Finn Taylor didn't mind, his wife seemed to be burdened. As such, he offered to take her out for a walk. Finn Taylor drove them to a marché. He wanted to get them a cat. That way, the house would seem cozier and more inviting. But Finn Taylor couldn't even tell the difference between short hairs, Persians, and coons. In the end, the couple fell in love with none of those but a ginger caught a chubby ginger cat. In Yvette Larson's words, they'd probably spend half of their money feeding this cat. Just as they walked out of the pet shop, they spotted a woman kneeling on the ground. Beside her was another woman, who was lashing out at her. From time to time, that woman would even kick the other woman who was on the ground. This drew the attention of many onlookers. Finn Taylor glanced at the woman throwing the punches and then at the one kneeling on the ground. The aggressor looked sharp and mean, while the victim looked naive and innocent. It seems like there's something more to this. It would have been fine if I didn't see it, but now that I have, I can't ignore it. Wait here for me, Finn Taylor told his wife before walking up to them. But Yvette Larson didn't stay as her husband had instructed her to. Instead, she followed closely behind him. It was then she realized why she had slowly fallen for that man in front of Harriet was because he was upright and just. In this materialistic society, many people's priorities had changed. There weren't many like Finn Taylor anymore. That fierce woman landed another slap on the other. Just then, Finn Taylor reached out to grab her. What are you doing? The fierce woman glared at Finn Taylor, wanting to skin him alive. Tell me, I've been watching you, and you've been scolding and hitting her. Why don't you tell everyone what's going on? That woman ignored Finn Taylor and broke free from his grasp. She then stuck her foot out toward the latter's crotch. That woman was terribly vicious and aimed straight at Finn Taylor's most vulnerable part. If that woman managed to kick him right there, Finn Taylor would probably no longer be able to have any children. Of course, that wasn't going to happen. Finn Taylor slapped that woman, throwing her more than 10 meters away. Because she had been struck down, her hair was in a mess, and her face was now swollen. How dare you hit me? That woman glared at Finn Taylor as though she was crazy. She couldn't believe that the latter had struck her. I'll hit you if I want to. So what? Finn Taylor sneered inwardly. I'm Master Peregrine, so what if I hit you? Who dared to hit my woman? A ferocious-looking man rushed up just then. He was a muscular man who looked well-built. His name was Scar Ross, and he was rather well-known in the marché. It had been years since he had started collecting protection fees from the shops around the area. Out of fear, many shopkeepers had chosen to pay him. That was why everyone was terrified of him. Because they had seen this fierce woman with Scar Ross, they couldn't help but think the worst of her. Yet, nobody dared to utter a thing. Your woman, aren't you going to do anything about her now that she's bullying someone? Scar Ross glared at Finn Taylor. Do you have a death wish? How dare you hit my woman? With that, Scar Ross threw a punch in Finn Taylor's direction. Of course, he was no match for the latter. Finn Taylor returned a light punch, but that was enough to send Scar Ross flying all the way back. The latter landed right next to a trash can along the road. Finn Taylor then walked up and picked the kneeling woman up. Tell me what happened. This woman was completely scared stiff and stuttered as she glanced at Scar Ross. I'm only giving you one chance. If you want to get your revenge, you'd better talk now. Otherwise, I'm leaving. You can deal with them yourself. After giving it some thought, the gaze in that woman's eyes hardened. Yes, he's my only chance. If I don't tell them the truth now, I'll probably have to take the blame for this for the rest of my life. She stole from me. When I caught her in the act, she smashed her phone on the ground, saying that I was the one who did it. She even said that I was maligning her. Finn Taylor turned to that vicious woman. Is that true? The vicious woman spat on the ground. Nonsense. I'm Scar Ross's woman. Do you think I'd steal money? Bitch, you were the one who stole it. After I caught you in the act, you even smashed my phone and maligned me. Why don't you take a look at what you're wearing and what I'm wearing? You're just a cheap woman who came from the countryside. How dare you accuse me? Finn Taylor glanced at that shop and shouted at the timid owner, do you have surveillance cameras? The owner was thrown into a frenzy, and he glanced at Scar Ross. As he pretended to walk out of the shop, he knocked against the computer, causing it to come crashing down on the ground. No, not anymore. Everyone saw exactly what had happened. It was impossible for a shop not to have any surveillance cameras. The owner had clearly destroyed all footage because he was afraid of retaliation from Scar Ross. But now that the surveillance cameras had indeed been damaged, it would be difficult to put things right. That's all right, don't we have witnesses? Hey, you were in that shop just now, weren't you? Why don't you tell us who was the one stealing? Scar Ross stood up and pointed at the owner. Naturally, that owner was scared stiff from Scar Ross's interrogation. He pointed at the honest woman. Diane Taylor, you've been working in our shop for several years. I never thought that you'd steal from us. The shop owner had just admitted that it was Diane Taylor who had stolen from the shop. However, everyone knew full well that it wasn't the truth. It's clear that you're only maligning Diane Taylor out of fear of Scar Ross. Yet, nobody had any evidence to prove him wrong. It seemed like Diane Taylor was about to be convicted for something she had never done. Finn Taylor squinted his eyes and gave it some thought. Hold on. He made a call to Horned Serpent, who was a computer genius. Finn Taylor believed that Horned Serpent would definitely find a way to get a hold of the surveillance footage in the area. Scar Ross was annoyed. Why should we wait? She's the one who accused my woman of stealing and even smashed her phone. I'm not asking for much. I just want her to pay us $15,000. Then, I'll let this matter go. As expected, Scar Ross was inhumane. He asked for $15,000 right away. $15,000 was an enormous sum of money to Diane Taylor. She was just an ordinary college student in San Francisco and had only come out to work because her family was poor. Never in a million years would she have expected to encounter such a situation. I said to hold on. If you don't understand me, I'll beat you up until you do. Thinking back to the punch Finn Taylor had thrown at him, Scar Ross eventually shrank back and shut up. 5 minutes passed. Because nothing had happened in the last 5 minutes, Scar Ross walked over once again. Tell me which gang you're from. If you want to interfere in this, just pay me on her behalf. Otherwise, you'd better shut up and stay out of this. I won't let others bully me, and I've already given you enough respect. Since you don't have any evidence, why don't we just call the police? Diane Taylor panicked the moment she heard that. If they do that, I will probably be arrested since I have no evidence to prove my innocence. If that leaves a mark on my record, my whole life will be ruined. Diane Taylor was frantic. Hee, I dare you to do anything to her with me here. I said to wait. Even if you have to wait for another 3 years, you'd better wait. Scar Ross reached over and tried to grab Diane Taylor, but Finn Taylor stopped him. With a gentle twist, Scar Ross's elbow popped out of place. Scar Ross was nothing more than a 3-year-old toddler in Finn Taylor's eyes. While training in the mountains, he had fought with bears. He had even managed to fracture that bear's bones. Yes, I wonder if that bear will hold it against me when I go back to visit. Just as Finn Taylor was reminiscing about the past, Horned Serpent sent a video to his phone. Finn Taylor glanced at his phone. After confirming the video's contents, he tossed his phone over to Diane Taylor. The latter was slightly confused, but she instinctively opened that video. She was overwhelmed with emotions as she watched it. She pointed at the phone and shouted, "This video. It recorded everything that happened just now. It'll prove my innocence." With that, Diane Taylor turned the phone to face the public and replayed the video. All the onlookers gathered around. From the video, it was clear that Scar Ross's woman had stolen from the shop and that Diane Taylor had gone up to stop her. Then, Scar Ross's woman smashed her own phone onto the ground. After that, they witnessed what had followed. Scar Ross, what else do you have to say? Scar Ross was slightly afraid. He rushed up, trying to snatch the phone away from Diane Taylor. Of course, he didn't succeed. This time, Finn Taylor didn't hold back anymore. He threw a few kicks and punches over. It would be at least 3 years before Scar Ross would get up from bed. With that settled, Finn Taylor walked up to Diane Taylor. He stretched his hand out. My phone. Diane Taylor was slightly nervous when she saw the former walking over, but she quickly handed his phone back to him after hearing his words. Finn Taylor had no interest in listening to her. He walked up to his wife, picked up the cat, and was getting ready to leave. But just then, Diane Taylor seemed to have gathered up her courage and rushed over. Hello, sir. My name is Diane Taylor, and I'm majoring in veterinary science. Could you please take me in? I'll take good care of your precious cat. Diane Taylor had proven her innocence, but she knew that her boss would definitely fire her out of fear of Scar Ross. In fact, it wasn't just her boss. The entire marché would probably be against her. However, she desperately needed a job. Finn Taylor was rendered speechless. I solved her problem for her, but why does it feel like I'm creating more trouble for myself? However, Yvette Larson maintained her smile. You know how to take care of cats. To be honest, taking care of this cat would take up too much of the couple's time that they didn't have. However, Yvette Larson knew that the cat would be done for if she were to hand it over to her mom. Yes, that's my major at college. I'll do well to take care of it. Yvette Larson hesitated. Can you cook and clean? Huh, Diane Taylor was stunned, but she immediately regained her senses and nodded. Yes, I can. All right, we'll hire you. You can help around the house and help to take care of our cat. Although Diane Taylor was slightly taken aback, she wasn't going to refuse the offer. Children from poor families had to grow up early, so she naturally wasn't going to despise the job of a nanny. Let me tell you something. My husband's surname is Taylor too. This must be fate. Diane Taylor looked at Finn Taylor, visibly moved. You're a Taylor too. Hello, hello. Finn Taylor handed the cat over to the girl. He, of course, wasn't going to go against his wife's decision. As the trio walked away, Diane Taylor looked awkwardly at the couple. About that, do you mind if I ask about my pay? Finn Taylor chuckled. Oh yes, I almost forgot to tell you. We must come to a consensus on your pay. How about $3,000 a month for now? If you think it's too much work, I can increase your pay from there. Diane Taylor wondered if she was dreaming. $3,000? What kind of nanny earns $3,000 a month? Could it be? The chapters is up by N0VE Iben. Her mind ran astray. I don't mind being paid less. I'm from a good family, and I'll only do what I should. I won't accede to any of those weird requests. PFF'd. Finn Taylor and Yvette Larson burst out into laughter in unison. Diane Taylor is too imaginative. You are really overthinking it. You'll understand why $3,000 is normal once you come to our house. Yvette Larson was the one who said that. Then, she added, oh right, he's really upright too. He'll ignore you even if you try to seduce him. Diane Taylor stole a glance at Finn Taylor. Seeing that he couldn't care less about her, she finally let her guard down. When she realized that Finn Taylor drove a BMW, she couldn't help but look on in awe. This family is probably really rich. Even though they are wealthy, they are still cultured and well-mannered. As expected, there is a huge difference between different people. The car drove along and headed toward Pacific Heights. Diane Taylor knew nothing about the property prices here. She was still a college student, and none of her friends were from such prestigious families. However, her heart started thumping rapidly as they arrived at number 1 Pacific Heights. She had never seen such a humongous house in her life. At that moment, she finally understood why Yvette Larson had told her that $3,000 weren't much once they arrived here. She also understood why Finn Taylor told her that she could request a higher salary if she thought that it was too much work. Who is she? Linda James sat on the sofa, savoring an apple. Seeing Finn Taylor and Yvette Larson return with a stranger, she was filled with curiosity. Mom, she's our hired help. You can let her take care of the cooking and cleaning around here from now on. Linda James was filled with displeasure upon hearing that. Why would you need hired help? Don't we have Finn Taylor? He was the one who cooked and cleaned in the past. Yvette Larson gestured around. Haven't we moved into a new house? He'll be too tired to clean the whole house. It's good that we hired a helper. Oh, how much does it cost? Linda James was still annoyed. $3,000. $3,000. Linda James leapt up. Finn Taylor, I think you must have gone crazy. Did you think that I'd stop caring about you just because you've bought a house? How could you force Yvette to hire a helper just because you don't want to cook? How could you hire a helper and such an expensive one at that? Tell me, who is forking out that $3,000? Yvette Larson sighed. Mom, we're a family. Why do you always try to draw lines between us? Linda James hated her daughter so much at that moment. What do you know? You may treat him like family, but does he treat you as family? I've already checked his name as the only one on this house's property deed. Finn Taylor, if you treat Yvette as family, you should transfer this house to her. What do you think about that? After Finn Taylor and Yvette Larson had gone out earlier, Linda James had been thinking about it. After a long while, she decided that her son-in-law had to transfer ownership of the house over to her daughter. Otherwise, this house would always be Finn Taylor's. If the couple gets divorced, our family will never get a share of the house. In fact, what will happen if Finn Taylor chases us out even if he doesn't get divorced? Finn Taylor had bought this house for his wife, intending for them to live alone. However, Linda James had refused to leave. Since his spouse hadn't said anything, Finn Taylor naturally said nothing as well. However, Linda James was afraid that he would kick her out one day. As such, she was trying to make her son-in-law transfer ownership of the house. But just because she was insensible didn't mean that her daughter was as well. "Mom, could you stop talking about that?" Just then, Yvette Larson's phone rang. It was Quince Larson. From the call, "It seems like Grandpa is looking for me to discuss an important matter. I have to rush down to the office right away." Yvette Larson had no time to waste on her mother and simply left. As for Finn Taylor, he simply left Diane Taylor with a few instructions before leaving with his wife. Seeing that her son-in-law was gone and that she failed in her mission, Linda James vented her anger on Diane Taylor. "What are you looking at? You'd better hurry up and get down to work. I think Finn Taylor must be crazy to offer you $3,000 a month." Following that, Linda James simply sat there, complaining nonstop about how unfair this whole situation was. Of course, Diane Taylor was terrified and didn't dare to rebut her. All she could do was get down to work. Suddenly, Linda James thought of something. "Don't tell me that you're Finn Taylor's mistress. Why else would he be in such a hurry to bring you home? Even if he's looking for a helper, he shouldn't offer such a high salary." "That's right, you must be Finn Taylor's mistress." Diane Taylor could ignore everything else Linda James said about her, but she wasn't going to take this lying down. "Linda James is clearly denigrating me and smearing my name." "No, I'm not." Thinking about how she had been bullied earlier in the day, tears welled up in Diane Taylor's eyes. "If you're not, why would you get so worked up? Why are you crying?" "I bet I'm right." Linda James landed a slap on the other's face. Ellipsis. As Finn Taylor and Yvette Larson arrived at the office, they felt that the atmosphere was strange. Even Eleanor Larson wasn't as arrogant as her usual self, and neither did she dare to mock the couple. Yvette Larson couldn't help but wonder if something had happened to the company. She walked into her office, where Joseph Larson and Quince Larson were already waiting. What surprised Yvette Larson was that her grandpa stood up the moment she walked in. Even though Quince Larson was initially reluctant, he was left with no choice but to stand as well once his grandpa stood up. "Grandpa, are you looking for me?" Yvette Larson sat down on her chair while her husband took a seat on the sofa by the side. Yvette Larson was nervous and asked, "Grandpa, what's wrong? You can tell me if anything's wrong." After giving it some thought, Joseph Larson still told the truth. After the gathering at Finn Taylor's house, Joseph Larson had been enraged by his eldest granddaughter. Quince Larson had only added fuel to the fire by saying that Yvette Larson was an outsider. Since she was now married to Finn Taylor, she was no longer a Larson even though the latter was a matrilocal son-in-law. As such, they couldn't afford to let Yvette Larson remain as the person in charge of the project with the Sullivan family. It was because they had changed the project's person in charge before they had started that they had drawn ire. But this time, Hunter Sullivan would definitely respect Joseph Larson as long as he personally talked it out with him. With Quince Larson's coaxing, Joseph Larson finally bought into it and headed to Xander Corporation with his grandson. In fact, they had even managed to get a meeting with Hunter Sullivan. However, the latter refused to allow a change in the project's person in charge. He wanted to terminate the project. This project was an important one to the Larson family. To prevent cash flow problems, the Larson family had even stopped all other projects to focus on this collaboration with the Sullivan family. But now, this project was going to be terminated too. The Sullivan family had already thrown their money into the project. If they delayed it and didn't get their money back, it would be the Sullivan family at a loss in the end. Even such a prestigious family would be on the verge of breaking down then. It was the thought of this that Joseph Larson had no choice but to beg his eldest granddaughter for help. Only Yvette Larson would be able to convince the Sullivan family to change their minds. The only one who could save the Larson family was her. Finn Taylor couldn't help but chuckle when he heard the old master's words. "How interesting. Grandpa, didn't you say that you were going to choose your successor based on our achievements? Why are you going back on your word so quickly?" Quince Larson flew into a rage when he saw that even Finn Taylor dared to speak ill of his grandpa. "Finn Taylor, who do you think you are? How dare you speak to Grandpa like that?" Yvette Larson shot Quince Larson a deadly glare. "Is Finn wrong?" She then let out a fake smile. "Don't you think so, Grandpa?" Joseph Larson had been humiliated today, but he had no other choice. He had brought this upon himself. If he hadn't listened to Quince Larson, none of this would have happened. "Yes," answered Joseph Larson quietly. He didn't want to say anything else. Yvette Larson turned to her cousin. "Did you hear that, Quince? Grandpa has admitted to it. I want you to apologize to Finn." "Apologize to Finn Taylor? You might as well just kill me." Finn Taylor, who are you? You're just a matrilocal son-in-law and a piece of trash. In contrast, I'm the heir to the Larson family. If I apologize to him today, this will be a stain on my life. Yvette Larson drummed her fingers against the table. As for Finn Taylor, his eyes were fixed on Quince Larson. It felt like they were trying to kill each other with their gazes. Neither was willing to compromise. All that could be heard in the room was Yvette Larson tapping the table. Tap, tap, tap. Every tap felt like a hammer hitting against Joseph Larson's heart. Eventually, he broke down. He threw a glance at his grandson. Apologize. Although Quince Larson didn't want to apologize, he had no other choice because his grandpa was now forcing him to do so. In the end, he looked at Finn Taylor. I'm sorry. As soon as Quince Larson said his apology, the entire office fell into silence. Everyone seemed to be contemplating something. Quince Larson felt very uncomfortable inwardly. Today, I humiliated myself. I want revenge. I will definitely take revenge. As long as I have the chance, I'll definitely take the chance to get my revenge on Yvette Larson and Finn Taylor. I'll make them pay for what they did today. Joseph Larson knew full well that he would be humiliating Quince Larson by making the latter apologize, but this concerned the family's life and death. He had no other choice. Dignity was nothing when compared to the Larson family's survival. Of course, Finn Taylor and Yvette Larson understood the situation well. Although they looked like they had won, this came at a price agreeing to their grandpa's request of saving the Larson family. As expected, Joseph Larson spoke up. Yvette, look at how Quince has apologized. You must help the Larson family get through this trial. Yvette Larson had to resist the urge to punch someone when seeing how biased her grandpa was. Eventually, the power of familial ties forced her to agree to his demands. I'll do my best, Grandpa. Only then did the old master finally feel relieved. Once Joseph Larson and Quince Larson left, Yvette Larson tried calling Hunter Sullivan. However, his phone was switched off. Very obviously, he didn't want to pick up her calls. It looks like we have to make a trip down to the Xander Corporation. Yvette Larson was frustrated, but there was nothing she could do. She headed out to Xander Corporation with her husband. Along the way, Yvette Larson did her calculations. Eventually, she realized just how much debt the Larson family would be in without this project. She couldn't help but panic, but there was nothing she could do except curse Quince Larson in her heart. This bast is really incompetent and turns everything to dust. If he were the slightest bit capable, the Larson family never would have landed up in this state. Seeing his wife's sorrow expressed on her face, Finn Taylor comforted her. It's all right. It doesn't matter even if the Larson family goes bankrupt. Your husband will help you rise up again, so what are those relatives anyway? Yvette Larson knew that her spouse was simply trying to comfort her. As such, she forced a smile out. However, that was truly what Finn Taylor had in mind. In fact, he had already known about this matter a long time ago. He was the one who had instructed Hunter Sullivan to terminate the project. Finn Taylor had two goals. Firstly, to give the Larson family a warning so that they would realize that Yvette Larson was this huge project's person in charge. Hence, they had better not set their sights on this, but affirm his wife's position and status in the family instead. Secondly, if the Larson family wanted to put Yvette Larson on the spot, he was prepared to let the Sullivan family end the contract for real. He could crush such an unimportant family like the Larson family in seconds. Without his wife, the Larson family would fall overnight. On the other hand, Yvette Larson would only be relieved of her burdens when without the Larson family. She would even rise up and improve her life and career. The car drove all the way to Xander Corporation. But just as Yvette Larson was about to go upstairs, she was stopped by the security officers. Hello, Ms. Larson. Mr. Sullivan instructed us to stop anyone from the Larson family from going upstairs. Yvette Larson had already expected this to happen. At that moment, she couldn't help but lash out at her cousin in her heart. Single quote. Quince Larson is so useless. Does he know how much we'll benefit from working with the Sullivan family? It's not just benefits. The Larson family might even get the chance to get out of San Francisco and move into the New York Circle. That's the capital and financial hub of the country. It'd be great if we can settle down there, but Quince Larson, you've ruined everything. You're such a scumbag. Finn Taylor stayed with his wife as she waited at the Xander Corporation's office for 2 hours. However, Hunter Sullivan never showed up. Yvette Larson could only return home in disappointment. As they arrived home and got out of the car, Finn Taylor spotted Diane Taylor running down the hill with tears streaming down her face. Instinctively, Finn Taylor knew that his mother-in-law had bullied her. He rushed over and grabbed her hand. Mr. Taylor, Please let go of me. I want to leave. Of course, he wasn't going to do so. She would definitely run away once he did. What happened? Just then, Yvette Larson rushed up too. Looking at the tear streaks on her face, she could also tell just how aggrieved she felt. Let her leave. Scram. At that very moment, Linda James rushed out of the house, never forgetting to butt into the conversation. Mom, what's wrong? Why are you making her leave? Yvette Larson couldn't help but feel that this was an incredulous situation. When she first saw Diane Taylor at the Marché, she had gotten a good first impression of the latter. Do you really have to do this, Mom? Yvette, you're really a fool. Don't you know that this woman is Finn Taylor's mistress? Huh, Yvette Larson sneered in complete disbelief. If Finn Taylor cheated on me, then all men in the world would definitely cheat on their wives as well. It's true. Why won't you believe me? Look, they're even holding hands now. Finn Taylor was only holding onto Diane Taylor's hand because he didn't want her to leave. But in the end, his mother-in-law had turned it into evidence against him. Mr. Taylor, Ms. Larson, I know that you are kind. You saved me today and even gave me a job, but I care about my dignity. I won't let someone ruin my reputation, so I can't work here. Using all her might, Diane Taylor managed to break free of Finn Taylor's grip and sprinted down the hill. Finn Taylor watched her departing figure and shouted, Diane, have you forgotten about what happened today? If you don't tell the truth and leave just like that, you'll be looked upon as a criminal for the rest of your life. Diane Taylor stopped the moment she heard those words. She was considering the paths before her. Eventually, she turned around and glared right at Linda James. I'm not Mr. Taylor's mistress. You framed Mr. Taylor and me only because you want Mr. Taylor to transfer ownership of the house over to your daughter. Because Diane Taylor had exposed her lies, Linda James was thrown into a frenzy. You even hit me and even wanted to pay me off so that I would admit to it. Then, you chased me away because I refused your offer. I'll never admit to something I've never done. Mr. Taylor is my benefactor, so I won't frame him just because of your dirty money. Diane Taylor spilled the truth. Linda James wanted to rebuke her, but both Finn Taylor and Yvette Larson knew just how their mother was. She was perfectly capable of doing that. Linda James tried to defend herself, but her son-in-law glared at her. Don't you think you went overboard? Linda James was frantic, but she put up a strong front. Overboard? How did I go overboard? I think you were the one who went overboard. I'm your mom, look at how you're speaking to me. Linda James completely ignored what she had just done and acted like an elder, demanding an apology from Finn Taylor. Mom, can you be reasonable? Even her daughter couldn't stand to watch from the sidelines anymore. I want you to apologize to her. Finn Taylor took a step forward and grabbed his mother-in-law's hand. Linda James struggled to break free, but it was to no avail. Finn Taylor, what do you want? Is this the way you treat your elders? Elders should behave like elders to deserve respect. You slapped her and even maligned her. Don't you think you owe her an apology? Linda James looked toward her daughter with pleading eyes. Yvette, don't you see that your mom is being forced into a corner? Arg, I'm going to die. I'm really going to die. Yvette Larson viciously treated as though she hadn't seen her mother's unreasonable tantrum. Finn Taylor refused to back down too. If you don't apologize, you can go back to live in our old house. Since this place doesn't suit you, you'll only live miserably here. The difference between their old house and number 1 Pacific Heights was like night and day. Finally, Linda James relented. Fine, I'll apologize. Let go of me. Of course, Finn Taylor didn't do so. He understood his mother-in-law all too well. If he were to let go, she definitely wouldn't admit to having said so. What he had to do was exert his dominance to force her to make her apology. I'm sorry. I apologize to you. Will that do? Although Linda James was still brusque, she had apologized after all. As such, Finn Taylor let her go. He then walked up to Diane Taylor and snatched something from her hands. I was the one who hired you, and I didn't fire you. Who allowed you to leave? Diane Taylor was moved, and tears welled up in her eyes as she glanced at her employer. Over the next few days, Yvette Larson could finally breathe a sigh of relief, seeing that her mother wasn't stirring up any more trouble. However, Yvette Larson was still feeling very down. Almost every day, she would make a trip to Xander Corporation and would call Hunter Sullivan. Yet, the result never changed. She was never allowed upstairs even after arriving at Xander Corporation. As for Hunter Sullivan, his phone was always switched off. That day, Finn Taylor took the initiative to visit his wife at her office. I want to discuss something with you. Finn Taylor's expression was stern as he entered the office. Yvette Larson felt as though her husband was going to say something important. What? I have a way for you to meet Hunter Sullivan. Huh? Yvette Larson stared at him and asked immediately, how? It's a little troublesome and a little dangerous. Yvette Larson was still confused, but she saw a playful smile creeping up her husband's face. Oh, there are terms. I have to think about it. Yvette Larson thought about it for a long while but realized that she had nothing to give to him. Her husband was the one who had purchased both their car and house. Moreover, they were both the best in their categories. Even she wouldn't have been able to afford them. What else can I give him? Just then, Yvette Larson thought of something. Every night, the couple slept in 2 separate bedrooms. Although they were a couple, they had never been intimate with each other. If you can really help me, I'll let you sleep in my bedroom. Finn Taylor smiled in satisfaction. This was exactly the answer he had been waiting for. All right, I'll settle it for you. Wait for my good news. With that, Finn Taylor stood up. But his wife was curious. What are you going to do? Hunter Sullivan has a villa on Pacific Heights. Yvette Larson sighed. She had thought that her significant other had another plan. She had already thought of this plan, but she had visited the house several times, and it had been locked every time she visited. It seemed as though Hunter Sullivan had disappeared into thin air. Their gate is locked. You won't get to meet him even if you go there. I'll break the gate down, Finn Taylor replied nonchalantly. Yvette Larson was slightly taken aback. Break it down. If I do that, the property manager will look for Hunter Sullivan on my behalf. With that said, Finn Taylor walked out of the office. After leaving, he headed straight for the Sullivan family's residence at Pacific Heights. Of course, Finn Taylor had his ways of getting in contact with Hunter Sullivan. However, he had to put on an act to the very end. In the end, he really smashed that gate. Naturally, that attracted the attention of Pacific Heights' property manager. When he saw that the perpetrator was the owner of number 1 Pacific Heights, he didn't dare to blame him for another. He simply felt that there had been a conflict between the 2 owners. Someone like the property manager was in no place to offend such owners. As such, he put the 2 parties in contact with each other. Just like that, Finn Taylor managed to get in contact with Hunter Sullivan, just like how he told his wife he would. Whatever followed was easy to resolve. Hunter Sullivan took the initiative to call Yvette Larson, saying that they had misunderstood each other. Now that he had had a few days to cool down, he thought that money was still more important and that they could continue with their project after all. However, Yvette Larson had to pay for his gate. Of course, Yvette Larson thanked Hunter Sullivan repeatedly, even promising him that she would replace his gate with a top-quality one. After hanging up the call, Yvette Larson heaved a sigh of relief. She had been tensed up over the past few days just because of this matter, and it had finally been solved. Just then, she heard a din outside. She opened the door to find that her grandpa Joseph Larson had arrived. This time, Joseph Larson wasn't alone. Not only were Quince Larson and Eleanor Larson standing behind him, but there were also many extended relatives of the Larson family. These people weren't very close to the Larson family, but they were still Larsons after all. As such, they still held shares in the company. Although it wasn't much, it was enough to guarantee that they wouldn't go hungry or homeless. However, they all flew into a frenzy after learning that the Larson family was about to go bankrupt. That was why they had all gathered at Joseph Larson's house, wanting him to provide them with a way out. No matter how much he tried, the old master couldn't convince these people. Left with no other choice, he could only bring them to the office so that Yvette Larson could settle this matter for him. Joseph, you're the family head, our survival depends on you. If Yvette Larson is incapable, you'd better take her down. I think Quince Larson is more reliable. Joseph, you're the family head, our survival depends on you. If Yvette Larson is incapable, you'd better take her down. I think Quince Larson is more reliable. That's right, Joseph, you're the family head, and the whole family is relying on you. Look at what's become of the company now. Why is it that the company is on the verge of going bankrupt after Yvette took over? Is this her fault? Although these relatives were all bums, they all loved to suck up to the rich and powerful. The old master had made himself very clear with his attitude. While Yvette Larson seemed to have made a name for herself recently, the Larson family relatives were clear about the most suitable candidate in Joseph Larson's mind. It was just that he couldn't voice out his thoughts. After all, he very much needed her to remain in charge of the project with the Sullivan family. She was his golden ticket. Before this project was completed, they needed Yvette Larson in the company. He couldn't afford to kick her aside just yet. However, the Larson family relatives knew that the Larson family would eventually fall into the hands of Quince Larson. That was why they immediately started sucking up to Quince Larson while putting Yvette Larson down. These were all nieces and nephews of the old master, so they were still Yvette Larson's elders. Yvette Larson naturally had a lot she wanted to say to them, but there was no way she could put them into words. It was also impossible to deprive them of their shares unless she became the Larson family head one day. Yvette Larson was in a rage, and she quickly shut her door and returned to her seat. She vented her anger by banging on her keyboard, but the door opened just then, and her grandpa brought those annoying relatives in. Yvette Larson didn't even bother to get up and simply greeted him. "Hello, Grandpa." This infuriated the Larson family relatives. "Oh, Yvette Larson, you're not even the Larson family head yet. How could you be so rude already? We're your uncles and aunties. How could you ignore us?" The one who had spoken was the wife of the second son of Joseph Larson's second brother. Her name was Helen Landon. She was the meanest amongst them all and always tried to stir trouble up for Yvette Larson. Yvette Larson glared at Helen Landon, so much so that the latter was slightly fearful. "What are you doing? This is the office. Are you going to beat us up?" Yvette Larson smiled. "Oh, so you know this is the office too. Rules are rules. The first rule in the Larson Corporation is that we disregard your position and status at home and look only at your position and status in the company. I'm the Larson Corporation's CEO. I remember that you seem to work in the Larson Corporation too. Was it as the Deputy Director of Sanitation? Go out and knock before entering again." Yvette Larson's boldness scared Helen Landon. Nonetheless, the latter refused to leave the room. "The whole Larson family would probably hear of it if I were to leave now. Then, I would definitely be made fun of." She looked at Joseph Larson. "Uncle, this is the granddaughter that you raised. She's so disrespectful and rude. Do you think she's worthy of being the CEO or the Larson family head?" Yvette Larson took off her employee badge. "Grandpa, Auntie Helen is right. I'm too disrespectful to be the Larson Corporation's CEO. I must do my duties as the CEO. Since I can't satisfy the public, I have no choice but to resign from my position." With that, she placed her badge on the desk and headed out. This stunned all her relatives. Today was unlike any other day. Everyone was clear that the Larson family had invested all of their money into the project with the Sullivan family. If that project were to fall through, the Larson family would go bankrupt. But now, the Sullivan family refused to have any contact with the Larson family. The only one who could do so was Yvette Larson. If she were to leave this office today, the Larson family would really be doomed. Joseph Larson didn't say anything but glared at Helen Landon with a cold gaze. All the other relatives quickly turned their eyes to her too. "Helen Landon, Yvette was right. Although you're her elder, you're her subordinate in the company. You are the one who's being disrespectful. I think you should be the one resigning instead." "That's right, Yvette is the Larson Corporation's CEO, so how could you be so disrespectful toward her?" These relatives knew no shame. In an instant, Helen Landon was being painted as the bad guy. Even she panicked. Eventually, she stood up and walked out. Then, she stood at the door and knocked gently. "CEO, can I come in?" Yvette Larson didn't say a word and simply nodded stiffly and proudly. "All right, we're all family. Why are we fighting with each other?" Eleanor Larson was kind and took the initiative to bring Helen Landon in. Only then did the old master speak up. "Yvette, your Auntie Helen has already admitted to her mistake. Just let this matter go." Yvette Larson didn't say a word, and time ticked by. Each second was torture for the Larson family. They were really fearful that Yvette Larson would simply leave. If she were to do that, it would mark the Larson family's end. 10 minutes passed before Yvette Larson picked up her employee badge and wore it again. The Larson family relatives finally heaved a sigh of relief. "Yvette, we're here to ask you if you've gotten in contact with the Sullivan family." Joseph Larson was pleased that his granddaughter hadn't chosen to abandon their family after all. "It's been settled, Grandpa." Yvette Larson didn't gain the Larson family's approval with those words. On the contrary, everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief or rather, suspicion. Not a single one of them believed her. "Settled? That can't be. Yvette, you haven't even gone out today." Eleanor Larson's question revealed her deep distrust in what her cousin had said. "Yvette, although all the elders are here, you don't have to feel too pressured. It was all my fault. If you think it's too difficult, you can let me know. I'll go to Xander Corporation and kneel there until Hunter Sullivan shows up. You can't lie to us just because you feel pressured. This project concerns the whole Larson family's survival. We have to know the truth, don't conceal it." Although Quince Larson seemed to be blaming himself, he was clearly accusing his cousin of lying to everyone. In fact, most of the Larson family members present even agreed with him. Even Joseph Larson shook his head gently. He didn't believe his granddaughter either. Yvette Larson, don't you think you should show us some proof that you've settled the matter? How else are we supposed to believe you? Eleanor Larson's words, the Larson family's gazes, and her grandpa's attitude completely disappointed Yvette Larson. I've tried my best and exhausted all means to find Hunter Sullivan for my family. In the end, I even begged my husband for a favor. But what I got in return was my relatives rebuking me. Not a single one of them believes me. Since they refused to believe me, why had they forced me to do it? Yvette Larson felt disappointed but also helpless. Familial relationships involve blood ties. I can sever ties with them, but can my father do so? He is a Larson too. He is Grandpa's son and always will be. Yvette Larson made a call, and very quickly, someone arrived at the office. She leaned back against her chair, feeling utterly exhausted. Tell the chairman about it. All right, ma'am. That person then reported some matters about the project being continued and showed them some documents from Xander Corporation. Let me take a look at that. Joseph Larson took the documents over to analyze them. These documents were real and had just been sent over by Xander Corporation. It seemed like the project was indeed going to start again. Joseph Larson looked embarrassed as he glanced at his granddaughter. Yvette, I wronged you again. You don't blame me for that, do you? Now, Yvette Larson no longer wanted to speak to her grandpa. I need to meet Hunter Sullivan, I'm leaving. She then picked up her bag and walked out, completely ignoring her grandpa's question. Seeing Yvette Larson's departing figure, Quince Larson gritted his teeth. What's the big deal? You're just gleaning off the Sullivan family wanting to collaborate with the Larson family. Eleanor Larson added, that's right. I don't understand why Hunter Sullivan doesn't want to work with you and insists on working with that woman. Do you think that something's going on between them? Thud. Joseph Larson slammed the documents in his hand onto the desk. Can you both shut up? You're both so useless, yet you dare to speak ill of others. The old master lashed out as his blood pressure shot up. He stumbled as though he was about to fall. Those Larson family relatives rushed up to support the old master as though they were trying to take credit for it. After a few deep gasps for air, Joseph Larson finally calmed down. Ellipsis. Yvette Larson felt as though her mood had significantly lifted after walking out of the Larson Corporation. It seemed as though the air outside was even fresher than usual. Her husband had the car, but she was in no hurry anyway. It had been a long while since she had taken a walk. Yvette Larson seemed like an innocent and romantic teenager. She shut her eyes, breathing in the blooming flowers' fragrance as she felt the gentle breeze in her face. Thud. Just then, she bumped into someone and even stepped on the puppy beside her. Woof, woof, woof. The puppy barked frantically at Yvette Larson. Knowing that she had caused an accident, she quickly apologized. I'm sorry, miss. I'm very, very sorry. Yvette Larson thought it was her fault to begin with and that there was no need to shy away from apologizing. However, the woman in front of her was dissatisfied. No, do you think you can get away with an apology after bumping into me? Hearing that, Yvette Larson knew that the other party wanted monetary compensation. She couldn't help but remark at her bad luck as she took out $150. I'm sorry, miss, do you think this is enough? The woman took a glance at the notes in Yvette Larson's hand and sneered. I thought you looked pretty educated. I didn't think that you'd be so dumb. Yvette Larson was stunned, not understanding what the other was saying. Do you mean that $150 isn't enough? I don't really care that you bumped into me. Anyway, I didn't fall or get hurt. Yvette Larson couldn't help but nod. Did I wrong her? Was I being too petty? But the woman's next words took Yvette Larson by surprise. But you stepped on my baby. Do you know what breed my baby is? He's a teddy. It's an expensive and intelligent breed. Huh, Yvette Larson felt slightly awkward and didn't know what to say. How about this? I think you didn't do it on purpose, so bow to my baby 3 times and pay me $15,000 for his medical fees. Then, I'll treat it as though nothing happened. Huh, Yvette Larson couldn't help but wonder if her ears were playing tricks on her. Bow to the dog 3 times and pay her $15,000. Isn't this a scam? No, miss, didn't you say that I didn't do it on purpose? Besides, you weren't hurt either. Why should I bow to your dog and compensate you with so much money? What? You stepped on my baby. Don't you think that you should apologize? My baby can't speak. In all other aspects, he's smarter than humans. Besides, our baby won a competition before. I only asked for $15,000 in compensation. That's already a steal. She's crazy. Yvette Larson rolled her eyes and then turned to leave without saying a word. But that woman refused to let her go and grabbed her arm. Seeing Yvette Larson resist, the woman threw a slap toward her face. Ellipsis. After settling his affairs with Hunter Sullivan, Finn Taylor drove toward the Larson Corporation. He still remembered what his wife had promised him earlier in the day. To be honest, he had been waiting for this day for the past 3 years. Even after arriving at the office, Finn Taylor couldn't find his wife, and it felt as though everyone was avoiding his gaze. Instinctively, Finn Taylor knew that his wife must have been bullied again. But where has she gone? Finn Taylor looked around the office, but it was to no avail. For some reason, he was getting jumpy. He couldn't shake off the feeling that something was about to happen. He made a call to Horned Serpent and asked him to find his wife's location. Within 5 minutes, they managed to narrow down on a location. Following Horned Serpent's directions, Finn Taylor sprinted toward that direction. Along the way, he happened to run into a group of people walking out of the mall. Squeezing through that crowd had wasted several precious minutes. Finn Taylor was getting more panicked by the minute. Finally, he spotted his wife after turning the corner. She was at the junction ahead, but just then, Finn Taylor spotted a woman slapping his wife right in the face. As he witnessed that sight, Finn Taylor flared up. "I don't even dare to touch my wife. How dare she hit my wife in front of me? Does she have a death wish?" That woman's hand was getting closer to his wife's face with every passing moment. 10 centimeters, 5 centimeters, 3 centimeters, 2 centimeters, 1 centimeter. Just as that woman's hand was about to land on Yvette Larson's face, Finn Taylor grabbed that woman's hand. He panted loudly, trying to catch his breath. He was clearly exhausted. He felt as though he had expended all of his energy and had probably broken the world record for sprints. He had covered such a long distance in such a short time. "Why are you grabbing me?" The woman tried to struggle free from Finn Taylor's grip, but her efforts were in vain. Thus, she yelled out. Finn Taylor ignored her and slapped her back. "Fuck, how dare you slap my wife? I'll slap you first. Who are you? How dare you slap me?" This woman didn't look like someone who could be trifled with. Naturally, she was fuming because Finn Taylor had slapped her. She tried to salvage the situation by throwing her arm out at Finn Taylor, but the latter simply sneered and shoved the former to the ground. Seeing that the woman had been beaten up, the dog seemed to be on a rampage and pounced at Finn Taylor. "I'm not going to let you do as you like, much less your dog." He simply stepped on that teddy dog and kicked it around. Seeing that her precious dog was being bullied, the woman flew into a rage. "How dare you kick my baby? I'll fight it out with you." That woman rushed over, but Finn Taylor casually kicked the dog toward her. The woman and her dog flew 10 meters back before finally landing on the ground with a loud thud. "How is it? Are you hurt?" Finn Taylor ignored the woman and her dog. He had only his wife on his mind. "Nothing." Afraid that her husband would worry, Yvette Larson quickly reassured him that she was fine. "What's the matter?" It was only right for men to stand up for their wives, and Finn Taylor was never afraid of getting into trouble. Even if his wife got herself into trouble, he would go all out to resolve it for her. "I bumped into her and accidentally stepped on her dog. I apologized to her and even offered her $150, but she insisted on me bowing to her dog and even asked for $15,000. Finn Taylor exuded a chilling coldness. Apologize to the dog? How did that woman even come up with that? Finn Taylor walked up to that woman and her dog. "What are you doing? What do you want? Do you think you're right? Your wife stepped on my baby." Finn Taylor sneered. "She was naturally wrong to have bumped into you, but she already apologized. You shouldn't have used this as an excuse to force her to do so many things. Do you know how much she suffered? How dare you use your livestock to humiliate my wife? I'll let you see what true livestock is like." The chapters is up by N0VE Iben. Finn Taylor picked that dog up. The puppy struggled frantically. "Let go of my baby. What are you trying to do?" Finn Taylor glanced at the dog in his arms, suddenly thinking of something. "Wait a minute, there's no collar. Is this dog really yours?" A trace of panic flashed past that woman's eyes at Finn Taylor's question. "Of course, he's mine." Finn Taylor's intuition told him that something was definitely amiss. "Forget it, since my wife has already apologized to you, I'll pay you. Let me see your license." This word threw the woman into an even more frantic frenzy. Finn Taylor grabbed her collar. "Don't tell me that you don't have a license. Is this dog even yours?" That woman was so frightened by the other's dominance that she finally spilled the truth. That dog isn't mine. I picked it up just now." The woman glanced at Finn Taylor. The latter could tell that this woman was completely flustered. It's not your dog, yet you dared to ask for $15,000 as compensation from my wife." I was wrong. I just saw that she had an expensive bag in her hand and thought that she'd be rich, so I wanted to extort some money from her. Yvette Larson looked at the bag in her hand, and she thought about how she had gotten it. At that time, she had gotten her husband to pick her up from the office for the very first time after he had left a good impression on her. In the end, he humiliated her after the electric scooter's battery had died. The very next day, he bought her a bag as an apology. She had disregarded it then. Now that some time had passed, she had taken it out without thinking much of it. This was the bag that Yvette Larson was holding right now. Is my bag very expensive? Yvette Larson was stunned. She suddenly realized that her husband was surprising again and again. I work at a boutique. An authentic bag like that costs $30,000. $30,000? Yvette Larson was stumped, and she glanced at her husband. Didn't you say that this bag cost only $30? Finn Taylor's eyes were still on that woman. You slapped my wife, forced her to apologize, and even tried to extort her. Hurry up and kneel down to her. He landed a kick straight on that woman's calf. She bent over in pain and fell on her knees. Still, Finn Taylor didn't let her off. How dare you spill my secrets? Go to hell. He threw his fist over. This punch would cripple the woman for the rest of her life. Her lungs had already been damaged. She would live the rest of her life with unceasing and untreatable coughs. Nonetheless, such a small punishment meant nothing when compared to what she had demanded of Yvette Larson. She's Master Peregrine's wife. How dare you make her bow to a stupid dog? If Peregrine Hall hears of this, it won't just be you who'll get hurt. Your whole family will be dead. Finn Taylor picked up his wife's hand. Let's go, I'll treat you to a meal. As she walked beside him, she punched him repeatedly. Tell me about this bag first. What's going on? What else do we have at home? Is there anything else I think is cheap but is actually very, very expensive? Finn Taylor chuckled. Me, of course, I'm nothing but a useless matrilocal son-in-law in the eyes of many others, but let me tell you I'm actually Master Peregrine. The four guardians are my subordinates, and I can get anything I want just by making my request known. I have billions of dollars under my name. In fact, I can control the whole world's economy if I want to. Yvette Larson couldn't help but chuckle as she listened to her husband. Ha ha ha, continue telling me more lies. I think you're getting more convincing with your stories. Why don't I register you for a social media account? You can write all of your stories out there. What do you think of the name, Heaven's Justice? Finn Taylor gave it some thought. Heaven's Justice, that sounds quite good. Yvette Larson had suffered enough in the Larson family. Now, she had even been beaten up by a crazy woman on the streets. Finn Taylor's heart couldn't help but ache for her. As such, he decided to bring his wife for a good meal to make it up to her. After a discussion, the couple decided against luxurious restaurants and ended up in a very ordinary family diner. But no sooner had they sat down than they spotted Clarine Landon. She was here for a meal too. Just like that, their date was disrupted by a heartless third wheel. The worst part was that this third wheel didn't feel bad for doing so. In fact, she was the one chatting with Yvette Larson throughout the meal, while Finn Taylor could only listen to the best friends. Finn Taylor couldn't hold himself back anymore. Clarine, are you done eating? Go home if you are. She rolled her eyes at him. What's wrong? Are you going to control me too? I'm just speaking to my best friend. Finn Taylor was speechless. What's this woman doing? Why doesn't she find herself a boyfriend instead of always butting into our relationship? If you want a boyfriend, I can find one for you. However, he held himself back on his wife's account. Oh right, Yvette, are you going to the Travelers Club party? Travelers Club? Finn Taylor was confused by this new term. He looked at the two beautiful women in front of him, waiting for them to give him an explanation. What he got in return was Clarine Landon's fury. How dare you ask about that? Do you know that Yvette was known to be the most beautiful lady there? It's because she married you that she fell out of favor and hasn't attended the party for 2 years. If you were the slightest bit capable, Yvette never would have fallen into such a state. Finn Taylor was stunned. What does that mean? Seeing that Clarine Landon was going to continue with her tirade, her best friend quickly stopped her. Hold on, I'd better tell him myself. She then told her husband all about the Travelers Club. In college, everyone had chosen to join different clubs and societies. Travelers Club was one of them. It was a club set up for members to travel together to beautiful locations, where they would leave with beautiful memories and photographs. While in the club, Yvette Larson had won the club's competition for 3 consecutive years with photographs of vast landscapes, majestic mountains, and skies. Because of that, she had become a huge star in the club. However, Yvette Larson gradually stopped attending such trips after graduating. Soon, her popularity decreased even when she did attend their parties and trips. But the moment she married Finn Taylor, she became a complete joke in their eyes, especially in the eyes of someone named Annie Fraser. In college, she had been Yvette Larson's greatest competitor in the club. Now that Yvette Larson was embroiled in such a scandal, she couldn't hold herself back. In fact, she simply exposed how the other had married a useless matrilocal son-in-law at their gathering. From then on, Yvette Larson had never attended another gathering. It was the first time Finn Taylor was hearing of this. He grabbed his wife's ice-cold hands. "You should have told me about this." Finn Taylor wasn't trying to scold her, he simply felt she had suffered too much because of him. "I'm not a piece of trash, and I'm sure that Yvette has already guessed so. However, I have no other choice. It isn't yet time for me to reveal my true identity. Donovan Taylor is still missing." Finn Taylor felt that he couldn't let his guard down just yet. Besides, Finn Taylor was still wary of someone Frida Cameron. She was Finn Taylor's grandma, but she didn't really like him. Even Finn Taylor didn't know why. He just knew that his grandmother had a lot to do with how his parents despised him and ignored him at home. If he were to reveal his identity while she was still around, he would probably be betrayed by the entire Peregrine Hall. As for the title of Master Peregrine, Finn Taylor didn't really care for it. It was simply a title the Taylor family had given him. What he wanted was a title that he earned for himself. "We'll be attending this trip too." Finn Taylor made the decision for his wife. Since she likes it, she has to go. As for all those who looked down on Yvette, I'll let them feel just how cruel the world really is. Just then, Finn Taylor's phone rang. He couldn't help but frown as he took a glance at it. It was a message from Zane Yeller. They had gotten news about Yvette Larson's piece of jade. Zane Yeller had sent him an address, asking him to head over. They had to discuss this matter face to face. But Finn Taylor had an important appointment tonight. Because he had helped his significant other resolve her troubles in the office, she had promised to let him sleep in her room. "What's wrong? Do you have something on?" asked Yvette Larson when she noticed her husband frowning. "Yes, I have to settle some matters. I might get home slightly later tonight." To be honest, Yvette Larson felt a little flustered. She hadn't decided what she was going to do at night. Hearing that her husband was heading out, she felt that the weight on her chest had been lifted slightly. "Before Finn Taylor returns, I will arrange my bedroom and see how to solve this problem." Suddenly, Finn Taylor also felt that it was a good idea for him to head out. Otherwise, it would be awkward for both of them that he was moving in suddenly. "You can drive the car home later." With that, Finn Taylor placed the key on the table and stood up. Just as he was about to leave, his wife suddenly asked, "Will you be back tonight?" Even she didn't know whether she hoped that he would be back. Nonetheless, she posed that question. "Of course, even if my legs are broken, I'll crawl home." PFF'd. Clarine Landon didn't understand what was going on but was tickled by their conversation. Yvette Larson's heart felt a little empty as she watched him walking off into the distance. Ellipsis. As soon as he exited the diner, Finn Taylor headed to the suburbs. Zane Yeller had always been under Finn Taylor's protection. Recently, the latter had been rather worried about his wife because of that piece of jade. Thus, he had instructed Zane Yeller to investigate it. He was terribly efficient. Although the four guardians hadn't been able to find out anything about it even after such a long time, Zane Yeller had. A random restaurant in the suburbs of San Francisco. Rather than a restaurant, it was much more like a food kiosk. There was only one table in the whole store, where their customers could have a quick meal. Finn Taylor was confused why Zane Yeller had chosen to meet him here. Still, he strolled in. Finn Taylor walked into the kiosk and took in his surroundings. This kiosk was decorated in the 80s style, and it was very obviously out of touch with current trends. He sat down and asked, "Is there anything to eat?" "Just a few homemade dishes. Do you want some? I'll go and heat them up for you." Finn Taylor wasn't too bothered by that. Although he wasn't hungry, it would be strange for him to sit there and wait for someone without ordering anything. "Just heat them all up then." The boss returned to the kitchen, and before long, he returned with 2 to 3 appetizers. As expected, they were all homemade. This wasn't an official restaurant, it was an ordinary food kiosk by the roadside. But for some reason, Finn Taylor couldn't help but feel that this kiosk's boss wasn't that simple. Whenever this man walked, his ears would move instinctively. This was a very minor detail that most people would overlook, but his master had taught him about this during his training in the mountains. There were some people who were trained to listen and observe their surroundings at all times, no matter what they were doing. One way of picking them out was how their ears would move just slightly as they walked. This happened because they were trying to listen to whatever was happening behind them. But anyone who did this had been through life and death situations and were acutely aware that their lives were in danger at all times. This was an instinct that arose from being in life and death situations. Could this boss be someone like that? However, Finn Taylor couldn't be sure whether his guess was accurate. "Boss, do you have any cigarettes?" The boss tossed Finn Taylor a box of cigarettes, but the latter flung them back after taking a look at them. A different brand. The boss caught them right in his hand. He paused for a moment but quickly regained his senses and tossed another packet of cigarettes to Finn Taylor. Actually, Finn Taylor didn't care about the brand of cigarettes he smoked. He had only done that to test the boss's reflexes. Finn Taylor had tossed that packet of cigarettes back at top speed. An ordinary person wouldn't have been able to catch it, but the boss had caught it with ease. The boss had obviously caught his own mistake too, and that was why he had paused. However, Finn Taylor didn't say anything and simply took a cigarette out of the packet. That must have been a coincidence. I don't think he caught anything, right? That was what the boss thought or hoped. But nothing went unnoticed by Finn Taylor. Just then, a few young men in white vests strolled into the kiosk. "Boss, we're out of cigarettes. Give us some." The leader of the gang treated the boss rudely, acting as though he was here to rob the place while asking for cigarettes. "Young Master Smith, we're just a small business. You've taken more than 20 cigarettes from me, but you haven't paid me a single cent. I'm on the verge of shutting my business down." The boss acted pitiful and tried to plead with that young man, young Master Smith. That young man couldn't be bothered about what the boss was saying. He just reached out and grabbed himself a packet of the best cigarettes there. "Young Master Smith, you're a prominent figure, and I'm just an ordinary person. Whatever you have in your pocket is enough to feed my family for 3 years. Could you give me some money?" Finn Taylor had witnessed everything. He couldn't understand why that boss wasn't fighting back. Given how agile he had been earlier while catching that packet of cigarettes, these thugs shouldn't be any trouble to him at all. "Ha ha ha, alright then, I'll reward you with some of that." With that, young Master Smith picked out some dirt from his pocket and smeared it on the boss's face. "How's that? Is that enough? Ha ha ha." The boss sighed and wiped his face. He could only remark at his bad luck. "You have nothing else, do you? We're leaving." Just as they were about to leave, Finn Taylor shouted, "Stop there." Finn Taylor couldn't take the matter lying down and eventually spoke up. "Oh, are you standing up for him?" Young Master Smith turned back to face Finn Taylor, his gaze full of disdain. "Young Master Smith, he was talking to me. Please leave." For some reason, the boss bowed to young Master Smith respectfully. "At least you're sensible." Young Master Smith was pleased with the boss's attitude, and he was prepared to leave once again. Finn Taylor spoke up yet again. "I wasn't talking to him, I was talking to you. What kind of young master are you? You're just a rotten worm." Young Master Smith turned back, his eyes filled with murderous intent. "Great, did you say that I'm a rotten worm? I love when other people tell me that. My dad said that about me too, and that's why he put me in such a deserted and lousy place." "You're right." Young Master Smith seemed to be praising Finn Taylor, but everyone could hear just how vicious he was through his tone. "Do you know who I am? I'm Sebastian Smith, the young master of New York's Smith family. My father locked me up here. Don't you all think that I'm nothing but a rotten worm? What, even a random guy can bully me now? If you're so capable, go with me to New York now. I'll show you just how powerful I am." The moment Sebastian Smith said that, the dozens of people behind him moved forward to surround Finn Taylor. It scared the boss so much that his face was drained of all color. He dropped down onto his knees, even kowtowing to Sebastian Smith. "Young Master Smith, I'm begging you. I've never treated you badly all these years. Young Master, I'll apologize on his behalf. I'm sorry he didn't recognize you, please spare him." With that, the boss turned to Finn Taylor. "Hurry up and apologize to young Master Smith." Finn Taylor picked up a piece of meat and put it in his mouth. "Why should I apologize? Do you have a death wish? Don't you see that it's young Master Smith of New York?" Finn Taylor picked up yet another piece of meat. "I do know the Smith family of New York, but I've never heard of anyone named Sebastian Smith. He must be from an irrelevant branch of the family. How dare he try to show off here?" Finn Taylor sneered. "Which useless and irrelevant Smith family is this? How dare they intimidate us by using the Smith family of New York?" Finn Taylor was absolutely right. Sebastian Smith was putting on an act. If he really were the descendant of such a prestigious family, he wouldn't even be making trouble for a boss of a mere food kiosk. It was humiliating that his lies were being exposed. Sebastian Smith naturally wasn't going to let Finn Taylor off. All of you, break his legs. The moment he gave his order, the men behind him swarmed toward Finn Taylor. Just then, there was a rumble outside. It seemed like a whole entourage of cars had arrived. Greetings, Mr. Taylor. I'm Titus Riley from the Riley family of New York. Greetings, Mr. Taylor. I'm Stephen Wright from the Wright family of New York. Greetings, Mr. Taylor. I'm Dylan Craig from the Craig family of New York. Ellipsis. Following a thunderous rumble outside the food kiosk, more than 100 cars stopped along the road. This was followed by several people greeting Finn Taylor. Although Sebastian Smith had never met them, these names weren't unfamiliar to him because he had grown up in New York as well. The chapters is up by N0VE Iben. Titus Riley, Stephen Wright, Dylan Craig, each of them had a prominent family behind the Monas that the Smith family couldn't even dream of interacting with. Before they could even finish introducing themselves, Sebastian Smith did a rough count of the people standing outside. More than 100 elders from New York are waiting to meet this young man in front of me. Who is he? What's his identity? Sebastian Smith felt his head tingle. It felt like he was getting swarmed by a hive of bees. Stop. Sebastian Smith couldn't think so far and immediately asked his subordinates to stop whatever they were doing. The man in front of me seems to wield great power. I don't even know how terribly I'd die if I accidentally hurt him. Brother, it was just a misunderstanding. The so-called young Master Smith, or even that so-called Smith family of New York, meant nothing in Finn Taylor's eyes. He couldn't even be bothered to waste any time on them. Of course, the food kiosk boss was completely shell-shocked. Who's this person who came to eat here today? He could subdue young Master Smith without doing anything at all. Someone strolled up to Finn Taylor. It was Zane Yeller. The heads of some of New York's families are waiting outside to see you. Finn Taylor looked up, displeasure evident on his face. The reason I've been willing to suffer humiliation in the Larson family is that I didn't want my identity to be exposed. What is Zane Yeller trying to do by arranging so many people to come here all at once? Of course, Zane Yeller understood Master Peregrine well. With just one glance, he had already guessed what the latter was thinking about. I've already instructed all of them. Nobody will dare to let anything slip. Give me a good reason to meet them. Even though Zane Yeller assured him that they wouldn't expose his identity, Finn Taylor wasn't very willing to meet them. He could summon them whenever he pleased anyway. I have a network in New York, and they're members of it. All of them participated in the investigation of that jade piece. Finn Taylor shut his eyes, understanding what Zane Yeller was saying. This means that they're all his disciples. In fact, they've all worked hard on this matter. Zane Yeller had probably agreed to their requests before this mission, and that's why they are all here. 3. Thinking about how the kiosk was rather small and that there were too many people outside, Finn Taylor allowed for only 3 people to be nominated. Naturally, Zane Yeller dared not go against him. As such, he went out and called Titus Riley, Stephen Wright, and Dylan Craig in. These were the 3 who had made the greatest contributions this time. Besides, they were the 3 that had the most prominent family backgrounds amongst the 100 people outside. It was only right to invite the 3 of them in. As soon as they entered the kiosk, the 3 men bowed respectfully, not daring to say a word at all. Sit. Finn Taylor didn't put up any airs and invited them to have a seat. However, they were terrified and dared not sit down. Zane Yeller understood Master Peregrine's temper well and spoke up. Since Mr. Taylor has already told you to sit, you should sit down. After being lectured, the 3 men finally sat down. Just then, Sebastian Smith rushed up and fell before Titus Riley. Mr. Riley, please save me. I'm Sebastian Smith. Last winter, I had a meal with you. Please, I'm begging you. Please save my life. Titus Riley was confused about what was going on in the first place. Finn Taylor picked up a piece of meat and put it in his mouth. You don't have to care about him. He provoked me and is probably scared by all of you appearing here. Titus Riley and Sebastian Smith didn't know each other well, they had only met once. Besides, Titus Riley wouldn't dare to save the latter even if they knew each other well. After all, he had witnessed just how impressive Zane Yeller was. Besides, Zane Yeller had once told them that they would surely be dead as long as Finn Taylor wanted them dead. For some reason, Titus Riley didn't think that Zane Yeller was exaggerating. This was because Zane Yeller had already won them over a long time ago. There was no point in lying to them. I'd only be getting myself into trouble by speaking up now. Go take care of it, said Finn Taylor blandly, and Zane Yeller nodded. The latter then hauled Sebastian Smith and his lackeys out. After a series of blood-curdling screams, everything went silent. Finn Taylor looked at the three men in front of him. You must be curious about my identity, right? They wanted to nod but didn't dare to move at all. Have you heard of Peregrine Hall? The three men had already made mental preparations, thinking they would be able to accept whatever Finn Taylor said. After all, these men were prominent figures who could influence the New York business world with just a word. They thought that they would never be frightened when facing anyone else, but it was clear that it was just their wishful thinking. I'm the Master Peregrine that they talk about. Thud. Immediately, Titus Riley, Stephen Wright, and Dylan Craig all fell to the ground. Fear, terror, trembling. The three men didn't even know how to describe their emotions, but they knew that they would have fainted from shock a long time ago if they hadn't forced themselves to stay conscious. From their knowledge, all those prominent figures they knew about meant nothing to Peregrine Hall. Finn Taylor couldn't help but shake his head at this sight. Although these three families have a certain status in New York, their performance has disappointed me. Go out. The three men nodded and didn't dare to say a word before heading out. Just then, Zane Yeller happened to walk in. He glanced at them. Do you guys already know about it? They nodded. Okay, if you want to stay alive, you'd better not say a word about it. The three men quickly assured him that they would never spill a word about Finn Taylor's identity. Compared to these three cowards, Finn Taylor admired this boss much more. Although he had gone down on his knees to beg Sebastian Smith, he had remained calm and collected even when Finn Taylor had announced his identity. It was a stark contrast to the three men's reactions. Boss, who are you? Finn Taylor's gaze was set firmly on the food kiosk boss. The latter smiled bitterly. Sir, don't joke around. What kind of identity could I possibly have? I'm just a lowly boss of a food kiosk. Finn Taylor sneered. I threw the packet of cigarettes at you at such great speed, but you managed to catch it. That shows that you must have been trained in martial arts. Even when I announced my identity earlier, those three men were so frightened that they started trembling. Yet, you remained calm. You must have been a prominent figure in the past too. You've chosen to hide yourself like that and don't even fight back or speak up when others bully you. Who are you? What have you been through? Finn Taylor's words seemed to strike a chord with the boss. It seemed like these words had brought back some memories. The boss took a cigarette from Finn Taylor's packet, lit it, and smiled bitterly. Little brother, listen to my advice. There's always someone greater than you. You'd better lie low and not do something like having 100 men waiting outside for you again. Hearing those words, Finn Taylor could tell that there was more to this man. Who is he? What has he been through? Finn Taylor wanted to ask him more questions, but the boss left with the cigarette still between his lips. Thus, he could only helplessly shake his head as he turned to Zane Yeller and pointed at the boss. Investigate him. The latter nodded. Have you found out who was the one behind that jade piece? Heather Larson. Finn Taylor had initially thought that it would have been Quince Larson, Eleanor Larson, Quinn Larson, or Hillary Stone. However, it had been none of them. Instead, it was Heather Larson. She was the most capable woman in the Larson family and was of the same generation as Finn Taylor's wife. However, she was older and had gone abroad for her studies a long time ago. Now, she had settled down in New York and was doing well for herself in a listed company. This woman was part of the Larson family, yet she didn't seem like part of the Larson family. That was because she was a Larson but hadn't returned in years. She didn't own any fewer assets than the Larson family, and that was why many thought that she wouldn't be interested in fighting over the Larson family's inheritance. Moreover, branch families usually had no way of inheriting the family if not for special situations. Not only did she target Ma'am, but she even targeted Quince Larson, Eleanor Larson, and Quinn Larson. Finn Taylor's gaze got even colder. This woman wants to kill all of the Larson family's third-generation members, but that makes sense. If the Larson family has no other heirs, the family will eventually end up in the branch family's hands. Heather Larson is also the most outstanding amongst them and has the highest chance of heading the family. Which company is she working for? Spring Property Management. It belongs to the Sinclair family of New York. The Sinclair family of New York. Finn Taylor frowned and eventually spat out, Matthew Sinclair. Yes, Matthew Sinclair was the head of New York's Sinclair family. He had crossed paths with Finn Taylor before. Interesting. It's getting more interesting. Suddenly, Finn Taylor shot a glance over. Don't tell me that you called me over just to meet those people. Zane Yeller was far from his usual self and looked a little awkward. Finn Taylor flared up. That must be the case. Does he know how important today is? Yvette allowed me to move into her bedroom today, and you nearly ruined that. Punish yourself for this. Zane Yeller dared not voice any objections and nodded in agreement. As Finn Taylor walked out of the food kiosk, he glanced around, looking for the boss. This person definitely isn't as simple as he appears to be. Finn Taylor was terribly curious about him. Unfortunately, he didn't see anyone. By the time Finn Taylor arrived home, all the lights had been switched off. However, he didn't dare to switch on the lights for fear of waking his wife. Thankfully, the moon was shining brightly, and he could still find his way around without switching the lights on. As he walked upstairs and arrived at the door, Finn Taylor took a deep breath in. Even in the most challenging and pressing situations, Master Peregrine was never afraid. Yet, he felt his heart thumping rapidly. He was feeling a little anxious. Finn Taylor pushed the door open and saw that a night light was still switched on. He knew that his wife was a little timid and would always leave a night light on even when she was asleep. With the light from the lamp, Finn Taylor could see that she had drawn a red line on the bed. Yvette Larson was on one side of the red line, while the other side of the red line was completely empty. Obviously, his wife had left that for him. Actually, Yvette Larson had thought about it for a long time after returning home alone. Very soon, she would have to share a bed with her husband. To be honest, she couldn't really accept that, but she had already promised him and couldn't go back on her word. She had already agreed to let her husband move into her room. Of course, she could ask him to sleep on the floor. In fact, she could even generously choose to take the floor. But after a long time, she gave up on that thought. She felt that she would be going back on her word if she were to do so. In that situation, her relationship with her husband would definitely break down. This was how she had come up with such a perfect solution. The moment Finn Taylor got up onto the bed, he could feel his wife moving slightly. Is she still awake? That was Finn Taylor's first thought. As such, he started observing her. He realized that her eyelashes were still trembling slightly. As expected, she's still awake. Are you hungry? Asked Finn Taylor suddenly, but his wife ignored him. She continued with her act. Shall we go out for some grilled chicken? Yvette Larson remained still, but she was already itching to get out of bed. No, how about fried chicken? Finally, Yvette Larson could no longer hold herself in. She got up and threw her pillow at her husband. Everything happened in a split second. It seemed to have happened in the blink of an eye. The chapters is up by N0VE Iben. Why are you making so much noise? I can't even sleep well. Finn Taylor stuck his hand out to pinch his wife's face. Were you staying up to wait for me? His significant other naturally denied everything and rolled her eyes. Nonsense. I was already asleep, but you woke me up. Is that so? Said Finn Taylor and remained silent after that. He kept his eyes on Yvette Larson's. She had initially met her husband's gaze, but very quickly, she turned away. A liar would never be able to look directly into someone else's eyes. Oh right, when is the Travelers Club gathering? Finn Taylor didn't want the atmosphere to be too awkward and changed the topic. Now that they were talking about the Travelers Club, Yvette Larson seemed different. Finn, I think we'd better not go for the gathering. Yvette Larson thought of some bad memories and suggested that they not attend it. No, we have to go. Yvette Larson saw that her husband was resolute and wasn't going to give in. What, are you going to rebuke me now? Finn Taylor narrowed his eyes. Those people want to bully you. Don't you think I should teach them a lesson? Yvette Larson was stunned. My husband is too charming. He's no piece of trash, he just couldn't be bothered to get back at them. But just look at the thieves, no piece of trash when someone bullies me. Oh, okay, Yvette Larson nodded, not trying to stop her husband anymore. He was her husband. As long as he made a decision, she would simply trust him as his wife. We still have a week until that gathering. Now that we've drifted apart, we no longer compare our photos like we did in college. We just get together to have a meal, chat, and play some games. Actually, everyone has just been flaunting their wealth during our gatherings over the past few years. It's really meaningless, but we can still go if you want to. Finn Taylor nodded as though he was deep in thought. Time flew by, and the day of the Travelers Club gathering arrived. Over the past few days, Zane Yeller had sent Master Peregrine some information. The boss of that food kiosk was named Dagger Martin. He had indeed been a vicious man in the past and had been a prominent figure in San Francisco. Once, he had gone all the way to Siberia and assassinated a powerful man there with just a single dagger. He could fight against hundreds of people alone. What a feat that was. It was exactly because of this that another gang leader had kidnapped his woman. However, he had provoked too many powerful forces in Siberia, and they all came charging at him. On the third day, Dagger Martin witnessed his woman dying right in front of him. Then, they had broken both his legs. It was through sheer willpower that he had managed to escape and survive. From then on, he had gone into hiding, living a normal life by running this food kiosk. Many customers had eaten at this food kiosk, and from their memories, the boss was a foolish coward. Who would have imagined that he had been such an impressive figure in the past? Interesting. With that, Finn Taylor instructed Zane Yeller to check on the Siberian gang leader who had gone against Dagger Martin in the first place. He wanted Zane Yeller to bring that man over. After doing all that, Finn Taylor and Yvette Larson got ready to attend the Travelers Club gathering. This year, the gathering was being held in New York. New York was a global city, and the views were spectacular. Finn Taylor had intended on driving his BMW over, but Linda James said that she was going to visit her sisters in that car. Finn Taylor knew that his mother-in-law wanted to boast to her sisters that she had a car and a house now. Her car was a BMW, and her house was number 1 Pacific Heights. With no other choice, Finn Taylor could only take a long bus ride over with his wife. Thankfully, it was rather convenient, and he didn't think much of it. He glanced at his spouse, who was giggling. Although she was the Larson family's eldest young lady, she didn't have the airs of a spoiled young lady. It's not like I haven't taken a bus in the past. We don't have to drive. But not everyone was as understanding as her, just like Clarine Landon, who was making this journey with the couple. Along the way, she repeatedly rolled her eyes at Finn Taylor. I must say, I don't mind that you let Auntie Linda have the car, but couldn't you have rented one? Do you know how many people will be at the gathering? Don't you think that they will think that Yvette is leading a sad life now that she's married? Won't they become even more pleased and gleeful, especially Annie Fraser? This was Finn Taylor's second time hearing this name. Clarine Landon had mentioned it once while at the diner, and she had told him that Annie Fraser would always bully his wife in the past. After Yvette Larson won the competition several times, Annie Fraser had gotten even more displeased and hated her even more. Finn Taylor wanted to see just how arrogant this Annie Fraser was. After a long journey, the trio finally arrived in New York. The traveling club members had chosen to hold this gathering at a hotel named Sands Bay, which wasn't far from the bus station. Because of what Clarine Landon had said earlier, Finn Taylor hailed a cab this time. Just as they arrived at the hotel, a Maserati just pulled in as well. The two cars rolled to a stop at the same time, and their passengers got out at the very same time. As Finn Taylor got out of the taxi, he noticed a woman getting out of the Maserati's front passenger seat. Her eyes were filled with hatred as she glanced toward them. Clarine Landon immediately reminded Finn Taylor, "She's Annie Fraser. That man is her husband Michael Sinclair. He's the eldest son of New York's Sinclair family." Hearing Clarine Landon's words, Finn Taylor couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. What a coincidence, it's such a small world. Annie Fraser has a grudge against Yvette, while I wanted to meet Michael Sinclair's family as well. It's all because Heather Larson works in their company, that woman who was born in the Larson family but is trying to harm my wife. It's just as well, I'll get rid of all of them together. Oh, the Travelers Club's beauty M's. Yvette Larson is finally willing to attend this gathering. What an honor. But why have you fallen to such a state? Why did you have to take a taxi here? Don't tell me that you don't even have enough money to buy a car. The moment Annie Fraser approached them, she spoke about how Yvette Larson was taking a taxi. That irked Finn Taylor, and his gaze became incredibly cold. $5, please. Of course, Annie Fraser wasn't going to let that driver's word go. Only $5. Yvette, your husband is so considerate. He hailed a cab even though it was such a short distance. Hey, where did they come from? That driver didn't give it much thought and simply answered, the bus station. Pissed, Annie Fraser bent over in laughter at the driver's words. Wow, the bus station, how amazing. Yvette Larson, don't mind me asking. Don't tell me that you guys took a bus over from San Francisco. I was just joking, but I didn't really expect your family not to have a car. However, I guess that's normal. You guys even have a matrilocal son-in-law, so what kind of car would you be able to afford? First, she had talked about them taking a taxi. Now, she was even talking about Finn Taylor's status as a matrilocal son-in-law. Annie Fraser couldn't wait to vent all her anger toward Yvette Larson all at once. Annie Fraser, you're getting more beautiful with time. It seems like your surgeries have done you well. At last, Clarine Landon couldn't stand it any longer. Thus, she mocked the other. Of course, Annie Fraser was annoyed. Who got surgeries done? This is natural beauty. Yvette Larson suddenly spoke up. Really, shall we look at some photos we took in college? She was sure that the other had undergone plastic surgery. In college, Annie Fraser had been quite pretty, but it was still a huge difference from her current appearance. Yvette Larson could spot countless changes with just one glance. Her words stumped Annie Fraser, and the latter was obviously unwilling for the other to take out photos from the past. As such, she quickly changed the topic. "Sigh, let's not talk about the past. Oh right, did you see my Maserati? Isn't it beautiful? My husband gave it to me for my birthday." "Oh right, Yvette, you don't know my husband, so let me introduce him. He's the Sinclair family's eldest son, Michael Sinclair. His family is in the real estate business and is worth billions. Yvette, if you need a job, you can always let my husband know. There's nothing he can't do in New York." The Sinclair family of New York. They were nothing but a second-tier family in New York, but they could easily beat the Sanders family if they had settled in San Francisco instead. Yvette Larson dared not speak up. She dared to offend Annie Fraser but not Michael Sinclair. "Eldest son, did your dad get a mistress?" Just then, Finn Taylor posed a seemingly innocent question, but it caused Michael Sinclair to feel extremely awkward because that was the truth. His parents had gotten together and started their business while they were still poor. Unfortunately, men often strayed after getting rich. Michael Sinclair's father Charles Sinclair had hooked up with his secretary a few years ago. Eventually, that secretary had even gotten pregnant, and Charles Sinclair had filed for divorce. Of course, Michael Sinclair's mother refused. Following that, she could only watch as that secretary's stomach grew by the day. In the end, Charles Sinclair compromised and crafted his will in advance. Once he passed on, the company would go to Michael Sinclair. His other assets would be equally split between his two children. Only with that was the couple finally able to get a divorce. Now, Charles Sinclair was married to that young and beautiful secretary, who had even given him a son. That was why Michael Sinclair said that he was the Sinclair family's eldest son, but some things were left unsaid. Once said, they would only create a terribly embarrassing situation. But since Annie Fraser didn't have any good intentions, there was no need for Finn Taylor to respect them either. "Did I say something wrong? Do you mean that your parents are still married? Didn't Annie Fraser say that I was nothing but a useless matrilocal son-in-law? Great, I brought a bag full of trash today. I'll pursue this until they answer me." Michael Sinclair clenched his fist, resisting the urge to punch someone. However, Finn Taylor seemed not to have felt the strange atmosphere. He picked up his phone and did a quick search before turning to his wife. "Yvette, I found it. His parents got divorced a few years ago, and his stepmother gave birth to a younger brother last year. Hey, it says here that someone spotted his dad with another young and pretty mistress last month." Yvette Larson had no interest in any of that, but she was delighted to see how infuriated Annie Fraser and Michael Sinclair were. However, Clarine Landon was much less polite. She snatched the phone from Finn Taylor and started to read those gossip articles. Just then, the other Travelers Club members who had already arrived walked out of the hotel. That was how they all heard the article. As Clarine Landon finished reading the article, Finn Taylor turned to Michael Sinclair. "Is that article real? If it's fake, you must sue that author. He's stirring up rumors to ruin your family's reputation." Finn Taylor's kind reminder sounded like ridicule in Michael Sinclair's ears. "Come on, everyone, let's go in and eat." Afraid that the situation was getting awkward, someone quickly ushered the rest in. Finn Taylor walked in without any care with his wife in tow. Clarine Landon followed behind the couple, not forgetting to pull a funny face at Annie Fraser as she walked past her. This infuriated the latter. Michael Sinclair was fuming and wanted to leave. Eventually, his wife still pulled him in. After they sat down, Annie Fraser quickly placed her order with the waiter. She then threw the menu onto the table. "Please go ahead and order whatever you like. I'll give you all a treat. Yvette, you haven't been to our gathering for years. I've missed you, so be sure to eat more to make up for it." Finn Taylor took the menu over and seriously ordered the dishes. Annie Fraser couldn't help but mock him for how quickly he was ordering the dishes. A piece of trash is a piece of trash after all. All he knows to do is talk. Look at how you're ordering the dishes now. You're just like a piece of trash that hasn't been out of the countryside. After Finn Taylor ordered a few dishes, he turned to the waiter and asked, "Is this made by Chef Miller?" That waiter didn't think much of the question and simply replied, "Our chef's surname is Miller, but I'm not sure if he's the same guy you're talking about." Annie Fraser couldn't help but chuckle. "Yvette, it seems like your husband is quite close with the chef here, but don't you think that a gentleman should stay away from the kitchen? Our Michael deals with multi-million-dollar business deals, but your husband deals with cooking ingredients. I guess that's the difference between people." Yvette Larson hated others looking down on her husband. She wanted to rebuke the other, but her husband tugged on her clothes to stop her. Once everyone ordered their dishes, Finn Taylor told the waiter, "Tell Chef Miller that Finn Taylor is here." PFF'd. This time, it wasn't just Annie Fraser who was laughing. Even all her other classmates burst out into laughter. Look at Michael Sinclair. He's dealing with multi-million-dollar business deals, but your Finn Taylor is friends with a mere chef. More importantly, you should know your place. Why would you tell everyone that you're friends with a chef? Aren't you inviting ridicule? Finn Taylor, do you know Chef Miller here? Annie Fraser obviously wasn't going to let such a good opportunity go. She had purposely posed this question to make a joke out of Yvette Larson. Of course, I know him. Chef Miller is my disciple. To people like Annie Fraser and Michael Sinclair, they would probably think well of one if they had relations to a prominent family. After all, connections were everything in this society. But it was ridiculous for someone to proudly announce his friendship with a chef. Yet, Finn Taylor had announced it as though he was ignorant of all that. Finn Taylor, you said that Chef Miller is your disciple. Do you mean that you're a chef too? Finn Taylor gave it some thought and said, I don't think I'm much of a chef, but you can call me a nutritionist. Ha ha ha, Annie Fraser didn't even try to hide her disdain for Finn Taylor. He's just trying to put it nicely. Isn't a so-called nutritionist just a chef? Once we're done with our meal, I'll get Chef Miller to come over to meet you, Finn Taylor said seriously to his wife. Although she didn't understand why he was doing that, she nodded nonetheless. Very quickly, the dishes were served. Come on, don't feel bad. Please eat as much as you can. You can order a few more dishes if this isn't enough. Annie Fraser generously offered, but it was clear how boastful she was. Oh right, I'll help my husband ask about something. Is anyone here an architect? My husband's company is bidding for one of the Walker family's projects. We're only short of one architect before we can be chosen. Although we've already gotten in touch with several architects in Chicago, I thought that I'd give my classmates some priority. While Annie Fraser said that, everyone understood that she was simply trying to show off. However, they also knew that they had to suck up to the wealthy. This was the only way they could get some benefits too. Annie, do you mean that the Sinclair family is going to work with the Walker family? The Walker family was a prestigious family in New York. There were 4 major families in New York, and the Walker family was amongst them. If the Sinclair family could collaborate with them, it would definitely bring them to new heights. When that time came, Michael Sinclair and Annie Fraser's statuses would drastically improve. Not yet. There are several other families in New York who are fighting for this chance. Of course, we stand the greatest chance. The old master said he'll hand the project over to Michael if we manage to score that deal. After all, he's the heir to a billion-dollar corporation. Annie Fraser mentioned it as though it was no big deal, but everyone drew a breath in. Someone had already stood up and raised her glass. Annie Fraser, we were good friends in college. Cheers, you must take good care of us. The glass in that woman's hand wasn't just any cheap wine, but the most expensive liquor available there. As soon as she finished her sentence, she downed the entire glass in one shot. It was as though she was simply drinking water, yet she didn't seem fazed at all. Annie Fraser was extremely pleased by this sight. As the most outstanding amongst the members, it's only right that I deserve such respect. With that, many others naturally soon followed. They stood up one after the other, toasting in Annie Fraser's honor. Everyone had nothing but praises for her. Then, only Yvette Larson, Finn Taylor, and Clarine Landon were left. Annie Fraser was annoyed. Actually, none of the other people mattered. What she wanted to see was Yvette Larson bowing down before her. Unfortunately, that hadn't happened. Yvette Larson, you're so poor that you can't even buy a car. Why don't I let you and your husband work at the Sinclair family's company since we were both classmates? You can be a hostess at the reception. Also, your husband is a chef, right? We can get him to cook. Others had already supported Annie Fraser and spoken up for her. Oh, I never thought that the most beautiful lady would become a hostess now. This man deliberately left out the word reception, his insinuations clear. Ha ha ha, everyone bent over in laughter at that. But at that moment, Finn Taylor's gaze turned cold as he glanced at the man who had called his wife a hostess. His name is Jimmy Landon. He tried to woo Yvette in the past but started spreading rumors about her after she rejected him. Clarine Landon immediately explained to Finn Taylor. Although she was unsure why she even bothered doing so, she gave him the information nonetheless. Do you think it's very fun to joke around like that? Finn Taylor's gaze was fixed on that man. Kneel down and apologize. However, Finn Taylor's words sounded nothing more than a joke to everyone. Why the fuck should I apologize to you? Do you think I've not searched up on your family? You're just the matrilocal son-in-law of the Larson family. That's not Ali even know that the whole of San Francisco thinks of you as a piece of trash. In your 3 years of marriage, you've never even touched your own wife. You've been beaten up by your mother-in-law, Yvette, and even the Larson family. Do you want me to show you a photo as proof now? Jimmy Landon had had a crush on Yvette Larson in the past. He had thought that he was outstanding and that she would definitely accept him, but she had rejected him in front of the whole school. He had been utterly humiliated. From then on, he looked upon Yvette Larson as his enemy. After learning about Yvette Larson's marriage, he had gotten someone to check on it. The result tickled him for a whole day. I thought so highly of you, Yvette Larson. But in the end, you married a piece of trash. What a joke. At the mention of that, Finn Taylor's gaze became even more bone-chilling. He glanced at the clock and sneered. 10 minutes, you can say your last words. That man didn't understand what Finn Taylor was going on about and simply thought that the latter was a crazy fool. But the door to the private room was pushed open just then, and someone walked in. Before that person even arrived, they heard his voice. Mr. Taylor, when did you arrive in New York? I missed you so much. You should let me know the next time you come. I'd have personally picked you up. From these words, everyone guessed that it was Chef Miller. Of course, none of them even cared about such an insignificant man. Everyone present, such as Annie Fraser and Michael Sinclair, were prominent figures in New York. And even if they weren't especially well-known, they had all graduated from Ivy League schools. Even Yvette Larson, who they all looked down on, was from a second-tier family in San Francisco. What was a mere chef? We chose this private room because we want some privacy. How dare you disturb us when you're nothing but a mere chef? Do you have no respect for us? Do you think you can bully us just like that? Michael Sinclair didn't even glance at the door before he shouted, "Scram!" His lashing out was a little abrupt. After all, Chef Miller had only come because Finn Taylor had told the waiter to bring him here. But I'm the one giving a treat today, not you, Finn Taylor. Someone turned to Finn Taylor. If you want to meet that chef, you should get out too. Jimmy Landon added on with a sneer, Finn Taylor, I heard that you don't even dare to fight back or rebuke anyone who hits you or scolds you. Why don't you show everyone just how you do it every time? Scram. Ha ha ha. His words were met with another round of thunderous laughter. Jimmy Landon loved to play such tricks. He thought that he was humorous, but he was met with a deep voice questioning him. Who asked Mr. Taylor to scram? Jimmy Landon was utterly annoyed. This Chef Miller is so annoying. You're just a chef. How dare you speak up here? The chapters is up by N0VE Iban. I did. Who are you to say anything? Jimmy Landon didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to shut that chef up. I'm the customer, customers are king. You're just a chef. Do you think you can afford to offend me? I can shut you up and break your useless legs. Chef Miller walked in and kicked Jimmy Landon in the knees, shattering both of them. The latter bent down in pain and fell to the ground. Very obviously, Chef Miller had crippled Jimmy Landon with that kick. He was clearly not joking around. In an instant, the atmosphere in the room fell. Fuck, didn't I tell you to scram? Michael Sinclair had already been displeased by everything that had happened earlier. I'm such a well-known figure in New York, yet I'm being played by a mere chef. I said that I'm the eldest son of New York's Sinclair family and the heir to a billion-dollar corporation. Yet, I can't even order a mere chef around. What a joke. But the moment Michael Sinclair looked up and saw Chef Miller's face, he was so frightened that he fell off his chair. Which family are you from? How could you be so rude? Leaving aside the fact that someone here invited me over, I'm already old enough to be your grandpa. How dare you order me around and even ask me to scram? Did your elders raise you to act like this? Chef Miller pointed at Michael Sinclair, lecturing him. All the other Travelers Club members thought that it was their time to shine. You're just an old man. What are you yapping on about? Don't you know who you're talking to? He's Michael Sinclair, young master of New York's Sinclair family. Believe it or not, young Master Sinclair can put your name on the blacklist in New York, and nobody will ever hire you again. Slap. Before that person could finish his words, someone viciously slapped him right in the face. What shocked everyone was that it was Michael Sinclair who had slapped him. That's right, Michael Sinclair. Why, young Master Sinclair, why did you hit me? That person felt aggrieved. Even Annie Fraser didn't understand what her husband was doing. Michael, did you hit the wrong person? Shut up. Annie Fraser hadn't noticed how her husband was already trembling slightly. He was evidently in great fear, and it was all because of the Chef Miller in front of him. Wow, you're impressive. Look at how Michael Sinclair shut up once you showed up. He ignored me for the longest time. Finn Taylor seemed to be provoking Chef Miller. However, the latter didn't care. TCH, why don't you tell him your true identity then? We'll see how tough he dares to be then. Michael Sinclair was confused about what identity they were talking about, but he was clear about Chef Miller's true identity. Amongst the 4 major families of New York was the Terra family. 2 consecutive family heads had lived short lives, and the current head was Pierre Terra. Although he was young, he was capable. It was because of his young age that many other families in New York had tried to take over the Terra family. But in the end, they were the ones who had been taken over. And this Chef Miller in front of him was none other than the master of Pierre Terra. Michael Sinclair remembered that he was the martial arts teacher of Pierre Terra. Logically speaking, he should have been enjoying his retirement in the Terra family's home. Why is he here as a chef? Master Miller, it's been years since we met. How's it going? Are you still adept at martial arts? Chef Miller struck a punch, and there was a loud whoosh as his fist cut through the air. This thunderous sound was enough to prove just how well trained he was. Finn Taylor got up and walked up to Jimmy Landon. Do you remember that I said you only had 10 minutes left? Oh, that's not right. You have only 3 minutes now. If you don't want to suffer, you can jump down from that window. Finn Taylor pointed at the floor-to-ceiling windows. It would be a drop of at least 50 floors if he were to jump down from here. Even a superhero would die. From Michael Sinclair's words, Jimmy Landon had already inferred that Chef Miller had to be an impressive figure. That damed Finn Taylor, how could he have gotten to know someone like this? I shouldn't have offended him. Of course, I'm not going to commit suicide either. He crawled up to Michael Sinclair. Young Master Sinclair, I'm begging you. Please speak up for me. I don't want to die. I didn't say that about Yvette Larson on purpose. Michael Sinclair had no idea how to resolve this feud, but he now had an opportunity since Jimmy Landon had taken the initiative to come up to him. He picked the former up and started running. Then, he threw Jimmy Landon out of the window with everyone watching on in disbelief. Jimmy Landon would surely die after falling 50 floors down. With that, Michael Sinclair turned and kneeled on the ground. Greetings, Master Miller. I'm Michael Sinclair from the Sinclair family. I apologize for offending you earlier. I hope you'll be magnanimous and won't take it to heart. Please let me off, Master Miller. Mr. Miller was also known as Connor Miller. Of course, Michael Sinclair was a nobody to him. While Michael Sinclair was a show-off, he was just from a second-tier family in New York. Moreover, he wasn't even the Sinclair family head, he was just the family's eldest son. Although he had bragged about it, the truth was that the Sinclair family had only gotten a chance to interact with the Walker family because they had begged their grandparents. But who knew if they would be able to score that deal? In fact, the Walker family was still below the Terra family. Although there were 4 major families, there was a vast gap between them. For example, the Bowie family couldn't even compare to the White family. Connor Miller didn't even spare Michael Sinclair a glance and only chatted with Finn Taylor. It was such a loss to Pierre Terra that you left the Terra family. Connor Miller hadn't said much, but Michael Sinclair was visibly shaken. Based on what the former had said, Finn Taylor knew the Terra family head, Pierre Terra. He was young and wild and thought that he could take everything under his control. He thought nothing of others, and he managed to take charge of the entire White family in 3 months. If not for his father's friendship with the Terra family, do you think the latter would still be around today? Michael Sinclair understood nothing about what Finn Taylor was talking about. However, he thought about something his father had casually mentioned to him. The Terra family had once been the most powerful family in New York. However, the Terra family head Pierre Terra had a fiery temper. Yet, nobody in New York could do anything about him because of his family background. But just then, another family rose up suddenly. In just 3 months, that family rose up and took over the Terra family's position as the most powerful family in the city, and that family was none other than the White family. From what Finn Taylor said, he raised the White family. But how is that possible? Isn't he just a useless matrilocal son-in-law of the Larson family? Who's he to have such great power to be able to calm the raging storms? Forget it. After I left the Terra family, Pierre Terra came to look for me several times, but I refused to return. There are some relationships that can never be mended. The Terra family from New York's 4 major families seemed to be high and mighty, yet Finn Taylor had casually helped to raise them when he had trained in New York at the tender age of 14. It was just a pity that 2 consecutive family heads lived short lives and that the third Pierre Terra was slightly rebellious. Because he had become the Terra family head, he had no fear of Finn Taylor. As such, the latter had simply raised another family, the White family, to suppress the Tara family. With that done, Finn Taylor disappeared from the picture completely, never interfering in the White family's affairs ever again. At the tender age of 14, he had gotten himself involved in New York's business world. Finn Taylor was a prodigious tactician, and nobody even came close. It was during that period that he got to know Connor Miller, the Tara family's chef. Finn Taylor had an eye for picking out people, and he could tell right away that Connor Miller was teachable. As such, he quickly started teaching the latter culinary skills. Using potatoes as generals and salt and sugar as soldiers, Finn Taylor imparted a great deal of tactical knowledge to Connor Miller. In the end, the latter became Pierre Tara's teacher. After Pierre Tara took over the Tara family's helm, it was Connor Miller who guided the former as other families tried to take down the Tara family. Unfortunately, Pierre Tara ruthlessly forced Connor Miller out of the family. Then, the latter had found himself a job in a restaurant as a chef. While Finn Taylor and Connor Miller chatted unceasingly without missing a beat, none of the others present understood anything they were saying. Although Michael Sinclair couldn't understand most of the conversation, he had caught some bits and pieces of it. Thinking about how it had been these two people who had orchestrated all those events, he was horrified. Nobody in the room even dared to take a deep breath. Finally, the duo was done with their chat. It was only then that they seemed to have thought of Michael Sinclair and the rest. "Michael Sinclair, you have such an interesting wife." Finn Taylor glanced at him from the corner of his eye and then said, "Choose between your wife and the Sinclair family. You can only have one." Finn Taylor wasn't threatening Michael Sinclair. He was simply letting the latter know of this. If this had happened in the past, Michael Sinclair would have been sure that the former was simply bragging. After all, he was just a useless matrilocal son-in-law of the Larson family. But now that he had seen just how close he was with Connor Miller and had heard the conversation between them, he didn't dare to doubt the former any longer. He stood up and took hesitant steps up to Annie Fraser, his face ashen. Annie Fraser could feel only coldness from her husband. She was afraid, terrified, in fact. "Michael Sinclair, I'm your wife. What are you going to do to me? He's just a piece of trash. Are you really going to do as he says?" Michael Sinclair gave no care to what she was saying and simply picked up a chair, viciously smashing it on her head. Blood flowed down the latter's face. Annie Fraser's mind went blank, and she dropped onto the ground. However, she was still conscious. With blood in her mouth, she stuttered, Why are you helping that bitch, Yvette Larson?" The moment Annie Fraser uttered those words, Michael Sinclair shut his eyes. "Although I had exerted my strength earlier, I had aimed for her forehead. Annie's injury looks serious, but it isn't fatal. Unfortunately, this woman has a death wish. We've already gotten to this situation, yet she still dares to call Yvette Larson a bitch. Now, there is only death awaiting her." When Michael Sinclair opened his eyes, his gaze was like a dark hole. He aimed the leg of the chair right at Annie Fraser's temple. Pissed. Blood slowly flowed out. Annie Fraser was dead. She had died because of her arrogance and contempt for others. She had thought that she could do as she wished with the Sinclair family backing her. Unfortunately, there was always someone greater. "Michael Sinclair, I heard that there's someone named Heather Larson in your company." Michael Sinclair gave it some thought and nodded. Yes, we do have someone named Heather Larson in our company." As he said that, he suddenly thought of how Finn Taylor's wife was named Yvette Larson. Could they be sisters? "Yes, she's my wife's elder sister. You must help us to take good care of her," said Finn Taylor blandly. However, Michael Sinclair was confused as to what the former meant by that. Then, Finn Taylor continued and explained himself. "Heather Larson is a social butterfly and is a promiscuous woman. You must help her to find some capable people." Social butterfly, promiscuous woman, capable people. Michael Sinclair caught the most important keywords, and in an instant, he realized that it was true that Heather Larson was Yvette Larson's elder sister. However, they were probably on bad terms. What Finn Taylor had meant by taking care of her really meant to drive her to death. Of course, Finn Taylor couldn't explicitly say that he was trying to destroy a relative, much less do it himself. That was why he could only say it in such vague terms. Michael Sinclair knew that this was his only chance of surviving. Finn Taylor turned to Michael Sinclair. He believed that the latter was intelligent. Although the latter had offended him, he wasn't deserving of death yet. Of course, Heather Larson would have to die if she tried to harm his wife again. If Michael Sinclair didn't kill Heather Larson, he could wait to die as well. Finn Taylor got up and bade Connor Miller goodbye before leaving with his spouse and Clarine Landon. As for the others, they wanted to leave but were stopped by Michael Sinclair. Hand your phones over. Just one sentence from Michael Sinclair terrified them. Without any complaints, they took out their phones one after another. Then, Michael Sinclair smashed all their phones to pieces in front of them. I don't know if any of you recorded this, so this is probably safer. Let me tell you something. If you dare to say a peep about what happened today, you'll face an ending even worse than your phones. They shook their heads fervently, swearing never to say a thing. Michael Sinclair believed that they wouldn't either. After all, these powerless people would never fight against those in power. Peace was their greatest blessing. If they were to go against him and fail, there would definitely be unthinkable consequences. After they left the restaurant, Clarine Landon looked at Finn Taylor curiously. What's your identity? Why was Michael Sinclair so respectful toward you? Yvette Larson looked over too. To tell the truth, even she was curious. She had always thought that her husband was very mysterious. What identity could I possibly have? I was just putting on a bluff. I've known Chef Miller for years, but who would have known that he'd have such an impressive background? I guess Michael Sinclair was probably just afraid of Chef Miller. Although Finn Taylor's explanation wasn't what they wanted to hear, it was the most plausible. If Finn Taylor had such an extraordinary background, there's no way he would have been bullied for 3 whole years by the Larson family. Oh right, was it Chef Miller who gave you the money to buy the house and the car? Yes, but not really. A few years ago, Chef Miller told me about some stocks. I bought some and earned some money from it. However, I didn't make any more money after I lost touch with him. Since his wife thought that his money had something to do with Connor Miller, he would simply go with it. Yvette Larson thought that she was acute and had found out about the truth of the matter, and she nodded in satisfaction. Oh right, what shall we do about Jimmy Landon and Annie Fraser? At the mention of that, even the usually brash Clarine Landon started to worry. 2 people had died at that gathering. While they deserved to die because they had called Yvette a prostitute and a bitch, Finn Taylor would probably be implicated if investigations were to be conducted. However, Finn Taylor remained indifferent. Did that have anything to do with us? Michael Sinclair was the one who killed them, so he'll resolve the matter. Finn Taylor smiled. I never did anything. What do their deaths have to do with me? Oh right, why did you suddenly talk about Heather Larson? Yvette Larson was full of curiosity today. She couldn't help but feel that something was different about her husband today. However, her significant other simply took her hand. It seemed like he didn't want to answer that question. Although this had happened within closed doors, it hadn't remained under wraps. After all, there had been witnesses who had seen Jimmy Landon falling out of the window. The Terra family of New York. Pierre Terra was in the middle of a tea ceremony. Just then, someone ran in frantically. He looked up to see Levi Terra running in. Levi Terra was a servant who had grown up with Pierre Terra. They shared an extremely close relationship, and there were no secrets between them. The fear on Levi Terra's face was evident. What's wrong? Why are you in such a frenzy? Pierre Terra poured a cup of tea. Take a sip of tea and tell me what happened. But Levi Terra had no intention of drinking any tea. He's back. Thud. It was a simple sentence. In fact, Levi Terra hadn't even mentioned any names, yet the teacup in Pierre Terra's hands fell to the ground, smashing into pieces. The latter's face was filled with terror and fear. He's back. Yes, he even went to meet Connor Miller. Pierre Terra couldn't help but panic. Is he here to bring the Terra family down? No, I can't sit around waiting for that to happen. Pierre Terra's gaze turned ice cold. Finn Taylor, do you think so highly of yourself? Do you really think you have everything under your control? Don't you know how much everything has changed since you left New York? Today, the 4 families are allies. Although you were the one who raised the 4 families and wanted us to keep each other in check, we've made the business circle here our playing grounds. You've been away for too long. It's time for your 4 pawns to take control of the game now. Finn Taylor was the one who had raised all 4 families. Through the fight between the 4 families, Finn Taylor was trying to play out the fight between him and Peregrine Hall. But things had gradually changed after Finn Taylor left New York. While they had all hated each other in the beginning, they eventually formed an alliance. If one prospered, they would all prosper. If one fell, they would all fall. Pierre Terra was sure that Finn Taylor was back to deal with the Terra family this time. If you want to destroy the Terra family, you'll have to destroy all 4 families. I'm not afraid of you, Finn Taylor. Ellipsis. At that moment, Finn Taylor had an invitation in his hands. It was an invitation from the Sinclair family for Old Master Sinclair's 80th birthday. Finn Taylor had nothing to do with the Sinclair family, they were simply trying to get in his good books. This is interesting. Are you going? Yvette Larson's gaze was filled with worry as she looked at that invitation. Do you not want me to go? I know Annie Fraser's personality, and the Sinclair family is terribly vengeful. I'm afraid that this is an ambush and that it's a feast of vengeance. A feast of vengeance. Finn Taylor gazed into the distance and into the sky. Suddenly, a word popped up in his mind: Terra. Finn Taylor looked into the distance and at the sky. A feast of vengeance. Is it the Terra family hosting this party? I hope that isn't the case. After all, I had raised that family myself. But if it is really the Terra family, I'm not going to let them off easily. A king can't let his emotions cloud his judgment. Are you really going? Yvette Larson was truly worried, even though Michael Sinclair had been respectful toward her husband at that gathering. She was sure that Michael Sinclair had simply been putting on an act. Once Michael Sinclair had the chance, he would definitely retaliate. What will I do if something happens to Finn? Of course, they were so kind to invite me, so I naturally have to go. Fine, I'll go with you then. Yvette Larson had already decided that she was going to stick to her husband's side no matter what happened. He nodded without rejecting her. There are some things she's going to know about sooner or later. It'd be better for me to spill some details along the way instead of her finding out everything in one go. Clarine Landon stood by the side while looking at them expectantly. Then, can I go too? She knew that her question was a little abrupt. After all, she had no relation to Finn Taylor. Finn Taylor was the one being invited. It would make sense for him to bring his wife, but why would he bring his wife's best friend as well? But Clarine Landon was helpless. She had neither friends nor family in New York, nor did she know the city well. What will I do alone in the hotel without all of you? Of course, you can. Why not? All land belongs to the king, and all the people are his servants. I'm Master Peregrine. Can the Sinclair family really refuse anyone I'm bringing along? What shall we bring as a gift? Yvette Larson was wondering about what would make a good gift for someone's 80th birthday celebrations. However, Finn Taylor's answer dumbfounded her. Prepare 2 gifts. One being a peach with the word, Peregrine, on it, and the other being a coffin. When we attend the party that day, we don't have to be in a hurry to present our gifts. We just have to observe their attitudes. If they treat us politely, we'll present the peach. If they're rude and if that party is actually an ambush, we'll present that coffin to him as his 80th birthday present. Finn Taylor scared his wife. Are you serious? How could you give someone a coffin as his birthday present? However, Finn doesn't look like he's joking. Fine, I won't object to you giving him a coffin if it's really an ambush, but don't you think it's slightly inappropriate if he was sincerely offering an invitation to you? Finn Taylor laughed. It wouldn't be inappropriate. In fact, he'll even have to go down on his knees in gratitude. Yvette Larson was confused by her husband's words because she still knew nothing about his true identity as Master Peregrine. Within the circle, he was known as Master Peregrine. That was why he had asked for the word, Peregrine, to be written on the peach. Do you know what that would mean? Nobody would ever dare to make trouble for the Sinclair family in the future because everyone would know that Peregrine Hall is watching out for them. Then, the Sinclair family would never fall as long as Peregrine Hall didn't. A birthday party in exchange for the family surviving for another century. Wouldn't the Sinclair family's old master thank me profusely? Of course, how they'll be treated will also depend on their performance. Time flew by, and the Sinclair family's old master Louis Sinclair was celebrating his birthday. At the gate of the Sinclair family's residence, luxury cars were a dime a dozen. Almost all the most prestigious families in New York were in attendance to celebrate the old master's birthday. The Sinclair family head Charles Sinclair stood by the door, welcoming guests with his son, Michael Sinclair. Malcolm Landon wishes the old master a long life. Here's a 1,000-year-old ginseng. Clarence Jones wishes the old master a long life. Here's a piece of precious jade. Will Hughes wishes the old master a long life and good health. Here's a painting by a famous artist. Ellipsis. Prominent figures of New York were gathered at the Sinclair family's residence. One by one, they presented gifts that only got more expensive as they went down the line. Everyone standing by the side could only marvel as they saw the gifts. But once they thought about the rumor of how the Sinclair family was about to work with the Walker family, everyone understood why this was happening. Actually, these gifts weren't really meant for the Sinclair family. They were simply trying to curry favor with the Walker family through the Sinclair family. Unfortunately, they missed out on one important point. The Sinclair family hadn't even started their project with the Walker family. How would the Sinclair family be able to help them then? Perhaps they would have done so even if they had thought of that point. That was the business world. If they were slow, opportunities would slip out of their hands. The chapters is up by N0VE Iban. Now that the project hadn't started yet, they could use this chance to visit the Sinclair family openly. Once the collaboration was set in stone, there was no way they would have the opportunity to use the Sinclair family. Just as everyone was congratulating the old master, a car that seemed extremely out of place stopped in front of the Sinclair family's residence. It was a taxi. Of course, a taxi stopping in front of someone's house was nothing out of the ordinary. However, they had seen too many luxury cars today. Even Bentleys and BMWs were the worst amongst them. Rolls-Royces and Maseratis were the standard, yet a taxi had appeared amongst all these luxurious cars. It naturally attracted everyone's attention, but Michael Sinclair's eyes lit up when he saw that taxi. If my guess is right, that would be Finn Taylor and his party. As expected, Finn Taylor, Yvette Larson, and Clarine Landon got out of the taxi as the door opened. The moment he spotted the trio, Michael Sinclair acted as though he had seen his blood relatives and ran over quickly. "You're here, Mr. Taylor. Yvette, you look great today. Clarine, you look elegant too." It was hard for Yvette Larson and her best friend to get used to Michael Sinclair's sudden change in attitude. Although he had never been as blunt with his words as Annie Fraser, he had never been this polite either. Could it be that Michael Sinclair was really frightened by that incident? Is that why he's being so polite to us today? "Show the way, I want to see the old master." Michael Sinclair didn't show any sign of getting upset by Finn Taylor's tone that sounded as though he was giving a command. He simply agreed and led the way. In fact, he even turned back and gestured politely for Finn Taylor to follow him. No matter how high a position one held in New York, nobody had ever been treated in this manner. However, these three people who had arrived in a taxi had been treated with such respect. Of course, this attracted everyone's attention. They couldn't help but launch into a discussion about who these three people were. Who are these three? Why have I never met them? I don't know. I've met everyone from the prominent families of New York, but I've never met the three of them. Are they not from New York? Not from New York. That's possible. Didn't you see Michael Sinclair going out to welcome them in? Could he be a young master of a prestigious family? If he's not local and was still personally welcomed by Michael Sinclair, he must have quite a high status. Everyone in the Sinclair family's residence started discussing amongst themselves. But just then, someone laughed snidely. It was loud and out of place. "Xavier Wood, what are you laughing at?" The one laughing was Xavier Wood. His family was just an average family in New York, but Xavier Wood was good at networking and was on good terms with quite a few young masters of the most prominent families. As such, his career and status had risen as well. "I'm laughing at all of you. How could you mistake a piece of trash for a big shot?" Everyone was stumped and slightly confused by his words. "I recognize all three of the people you guys are talking about. If we talk about those two women, they're probably of the same status as me. As for that man, ha ha ha." Seeing how he was keeping them on edge, they quickly urged him to continue. "What about that man? He's the greatest piece of trash in this world." But everyone shook their heads in disbelief. Xavier Wood has to be lying. How can someone who was personally welcomed by Michael Sinclair be a piece of trash? "You should all know that I didn't go to college in New York but in San Francisco." They all nodded. Most people in this circle know about this, but why is he suddenly talking about that? "Those three people are from San Francisco. That pretty one is Yvette Larson, the Landon family's eldest princess. The slightly uglier one is Clarine Landon, the Landon family's only daughter. The Landon family and the Larson family are nothing but second-tier families in San Francisco. If they were in New York, they wouldn't even be a third-tier family." Seeing how Xavier Wood was so confident, they couldn't help but think that he was right. Could it be that he's telling the truth? "Then, tell us who that man is." Although Yvette Larson and Clarine Landon were both beautiful, everyone had seen clearly that Michael Sinclair had been most respectful to that man. That was why they were all curious about his identity. "You'll all get a shock if I do tell you." Because of this sentence, everyone became even more nervous. Could he be a big shot in San Francisco? The most prominent family in San Francisco would probably be on par with the Sinclair family. "That man is Finn Taylor, he's Yvette Larson's husband. To be more accurate, he's the matrilocal son-in-law of the Larson family. He's nothing but a piece of trash. In the 3 years that he's been married to Yvette Larson, he's been cooking and cleaning. He's never shared a bed with his wife, much less touched her. Anyone in the Larson family, even the lowliest branch families, can scold him and order him around. Even when he was chased out of the Larson family, he didn't dare to rebuke them. When anyone in the Larson family hits him, he'll even have to ask if they hurt their hand from hitting him." The more Xavier Wood said, the more excited he got. The audience also felt as though their morals were being ruined just by listening to him. By the time he finished, everyone felt as though they had been punched in the face. Is there really such a useless man in this world? Xavier Wood, are you for real? Are you just lying to us? Why would I lie to you? I can swear on my life that I was telling the absolute truth. Now that he had gone to this extent, nobody dared to doubt him. Nobody could imagine that the guest whom Michael Sinclair had treated so respectfully would have done such shameless things. At that moment, Charles Sinclair was still by the door. He had heard everything that Xavier Wood had said, but he remained indifferent. Everyone couldn't understand why Charles Sinclair wasn't chasing that guest away now that he knew the truth. Isn't it a disgrace for someone like that to be in the Sinclair family's residence? But it was the Sinclair family's matters, and they were in no place to cut in. With Michael Sinclair leading the way, Finn Taylor and the two ladies were soon brought to the second floor of the Sinclair family's residence. The old master Louis Sinclair was already 80 years old, yet he was still well built. When they entered, they were greeted by the sight of Louis Sinclair exercising. Beside him was a beautiful young girl, who looked to be about 18 only. She looked exceptionally bright and intelligent. Seeing that someone had entered, the girl looked up. The moment Finn Taylor saw that pair of eyes, he could feel the innocence in them. "Grandpa, this is the Mr. Taylor I told you about, Finn Taylor." Louis Sinclair acted as though he hadn't heard anything and simply continued with his exercise. Only when he finished his set did he finally look up. "Little Ava, go get our guests some tea." The little Ava that Louis Sinclair was speaking of was that bright and intelligent-looking girl. She nodded and immediately went out to get some tea. "Happy birthday, old master." Finn Taylor didn't hesitate to sit down on the old master's chair. He acted as though he was at home, even inviting Yvette Larson and her best friend to take a seat. Louis Sinclair was slightly displeased. "I've never been led on by anyone in my whole life. Do you think I'll let you take the lead today?" Just then, the girl returned. She served 3 cups of tea to the 3 guests. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Ava Duncan, but you can call me Little Ava." "Ava Duncan." Finn Taylor repeated that name in his heart before picking up his cup of tea and downing it in one shot. "Now that I've drunk your cup of tea, I owe you one. I'll spare you from death." Ava Duncan didn't understand what Finn Taylor was saying, only feeling that this man was strange. "Why do you have to talk about death? You're scaring a little girl. Come here, Ava." With Louis Sinclair's command, Ava immediately headed over. "Could you introduce Ava Duncan's relationship to the Sinclair family? She's my disciple." Clarine Landon had been drinking her cup of tea but nearly spat all of it out the moment she heard Louis Sinclair's words. The chapters is up by N0VE Iben. "What are you laughing about?" Yvette Larson asked while helping her best friend wipe away the tea. If she's the old master's disciple, wouldn't Michael Sinclair have to address her as Auntie? PFF'd. Eventually, even Yvette Larson couldn't hold in her laughter. Ava bounced over. "That's right, I'm Michael Sinclair's auntie. Come on, Michael, call me Auntie." Finn Taylor glanced at Ava Duncan. It's obvious that this young girl would fall into anyone's trap with a little coaxing. To be honest, Finn Taylor took a fancy to such people. In today's society, everyone tried to take advantage of others and deceived others without any care. Few were like Ava Duncan. "Stop it, Grandpa still has some important matters to discuss with our guests, so let's go out." It didn't matter if he had to address her as Auntie normally, but Michael Sinclair couldn't put his pride down and do so in front of so many other people. "Humph, I'm staying here with Master. You can leave alone." Michael Sinclair knew that there was no way of convincing this young girl. "Grandpa, the guests are still waiting for me. I'll go downstairs first." With that, he apologized to Finn Taylor and the best friends. "Mr. Taylor, I'm sorry. Please forgive me for not hosting you well, I'm just too busy." Finn Taylor waved him off, and Michael Sinclair finally left. Now, only 5 of them were left in the room. Finn Taylor picked up the empty teacup and said to Ava Duncan, "Please refill my cup." Ava Duncan huffed, "You're drinking it too quickly." Although she said that, she left to pour him more tea. Only after she left did Finn Taylor finally speak up. "Old Master, we're here to congratulate you sincerely, but I wonder whether the Sinclair family thinks the same. Or is this a feast of vengeance?" The old master's eyes glinted. "What do you mean? There's no need to beat around the bush and pretend that you don't know anything. Didn't Michael Sinclair tell you about what happened a few days ago? I'm telling you again that we're here to congratulate you sincerely. If the Sinclair family has any sinister plans up their sleeves, it's still not too late to pull back." As soon as Finn Taylor finished his sentence, Ava Duncan returned. He stood up and took the teacup from her. Then, he rubbed his head and placed the teacup down without taking a sip. After that, he left. Yvette Larson and Clarine Landon followed closely behind without any hesitation. Louis Sinclair stared at the trio's departing figures and then at the teacup. There was a meaningful look in his eyes. Did he distract Ava Duncan on purpose? Who is he, and why do I feel so oppressed now? It somehow feels like something is going to go wrong with our mission today. But no matter how Louis Sinclair felt, he had no way of stopping the mission. It was the Tara family and Walker family who had gotten in touch with him. They had forced him to agree to it in return for a collaboration with the Walker family. If he were to go back on his words now, he would offend both the Tara family and the Walker family. Then, the Sinclair family would have no way to eke out a living. Louis Sinclair rubbed his temples. He's just a young man who brought 2 women here. How powerful can one man be? Once the people from the Tara family and Walker family arrive, that young man will surely be dead. After walking out of the room, Michael Sinclair headed to the gate. He was waiting for the men from the Tara family and the Walker family. Then, it would be time for them to act. He had been utterly humiliated at the party that day. He had thought that he'd never be able to get his revenge. Who would have expected the Tara family to get in touch with them? The Tara family made it clear that they had severed all ties with Connor Miller a long time ago. Finn Taylor had simply been putting on an act. Thinking about how a useless matrilocal son-in-law had thrown him into such a frenzy using such intimidation methods, Michael Sinclair was outraged. In fact, he felt like killing someone. Today was the day of his revenge. Finn Taylor brought his wife and her best friend to the Sinclair family's garden, where there was a pavilion. The pavilion was next to an artificial lake, which was home to several koi fish. Finn Taylor, will the Sinclair family really do something to us? It was Clarine Landon asking this question. Now, she was regretting her decision to follow Finn Taylor here. She was even more regretful that she hadn't persuaded them out of this. She couldn't help but feel that something terrible was going to happen if they were to stay here any longer. Just then, more than 10 ATVs stopped at the gate of the Sinclair family's residence. Charles Sinclair and Michael Sinclair rushed up to welcome them. The atmosphere was getting stranger, and everyone couldn't help but feel uneasy. We're here for a celebration, but this doesn't seem much like a celebration. Could something really be wrong? When they spotted dozens of men in suits and sunglasses getting out of the ATVs with metal rods in their hands, everyone finally flew into a panic. Feeling the danger, everyone wanted nothing more than to leave. If they were to stay any longer, they would probably die. But just as they attempted to leave, 2 men in black flashed their passes. The Tara family of New York. The Walker family of New York. Everyone, stay where you are. If you dare to move, we'll kill you. Words from the Tara family were like the law, and everyone dared not do anything that went against them. At that moment, there were over 100 people in the residence. They were all prominent figures in New York, yet not a single one of them dared to move. Bring us there, ordered the men in black, and Michael Sinclair quickly led the way. With Michael Sinclair at the head of the group, dozens of men walked into the compound. Although everyone had questions in their hearts, nobody dared to speak up. After all, this concerned the Tara family and the Walker family. If they were to say anything, they might very well lose their lives. At the same time, Finn Taylor and the 2 ladies were still enjoying the gentle breeze in the pavilion. But just then, Finn Taylor's ears fluttered. He heard a series of footsteps, a very orderly series of footsteps. From their footsteps, there were probably more than 50 people headed in their direction. They're here. Finn Taylor spat those words out and turned to his wife and Clarine Landon. When they come over later, shut your eyes. Don't open them until I tell you to. Do you understand? It was Yvette Larson and Clarine Landon's first time seeing Finn Taylor so stern. They were both dumbfounded. They could only nod dazedly, not daring to say anything else. Oh, so you're hiding here. We've finally found you. Michael Sinclair was delighted when he caught sight of the trio. Michael Sinclair, it seems like I was too benevolent. I should have just killed you that day. Then, none of this would have happened. Michael Sinclair sneered. You're right. Unfortunately, you let me off the other day. But I'm not going to let you off today. Finn Taylor pointed at the men in black. None of them are from the Sinclair family, right? Tell me who sent them, and I'll kill only you. I won't involve the rest of the Sinclair family. Michael Sinclair couldn't help but chuckle. You're at death's door, yet you're still so stubborn. Looking at the men in black in front of him, Finn Taylor pursed his lips because he found a few familiar faces amongst them. In fact, he had personally raised a few of them. Great, are you guys going to be ingrates and rebel against me? Sam Jensen, not bad. You even dare to fight against me now. It looks like you made vast improvements over the past few years. Question mark. Sam Jensen trembled as Finn Taylor called him out. He walked out and bowed down. Greetings, young master. Finn Taylor chuckled. Are you really going to go against me? I don't want to make you an enemy, but I have no choice. I remember you telling me that I have to serve the Terra family till the day I die. No matter who they want me to kill, I'll have no choice but to do it. This is so even if they command me to kill myself. Finn Taylor narrowed his eyes. I had indeed said so. Is this what they mean by shooting oneself in the foot? I'm sorry, young master. Sam Jensen was the first to rush up. Finn Taylor was stunned. He's seeking death. That was right. Sam Jensen didn't want to fight Finn Taylor, but neither did he want to go against what the latter had taught him. As such, he charged up before anyone else did so. Sam Jensen knew that the other would definitely be able to take him down. Then, death was certain. That way, he would be able to prove that he had never betrayed him even up until his death. Good, good, good. Finn Taylor walked up after saying that. Shut your eyes. As Finn Taylor charged forward, he spat those words out. With that, Yvette Larson and Clarine Landon shut their eyes too. What are you all waiting for? Charge, Michael Sinclair yelled out at the same time, and the few dozen men in black charged forward. Finn Taylor was surrounded by dozens of muscular and well-trained men with metal rods in their hands. Yet, he never revealed a trace of nervousness or fear. Michael Sinclair simply felt that he was putting on an act. TCH, you're still pretending even now. I'll see how arrogant you can be when your head is busted on the ground later. Even up until now, Michael Sinclair refused to believe in Finn Taylor. He still believed that the latter had lied to him. He had already thought it through. If Finn Taylor was truly capable, why would he have been bullied in the Larson family for 3 whole years? Even if he didn't fight back against the Larson family, he should have managed to subdue Yvette Larson in these 3 years. If Finn Taylor had some abilities of his own, he should have fought back 3 years ago. There would have been no need for him to wait until today. That could only mean that he was simply putting up a false front. However, Michael Sinclair had imagined that the scene would end with Finn Taylor being badly defeated. Yet, that wasn't the case. Even the most well-trained men from the Terra family and the Walker family were like papier-mâché in Finn Taylor's hands. The chapters is up by N0VE Iban. Every one of Finn Taylor's punches and kicks was pure torture to those so-called masters. In fact, Sam Jensen, who had rushed up first, was the one who had been punched the least. In merely 5 minutes, the few dozen men were lying on the ground. Finn Taylor patted the dust off his clothes and glared at Michael Sinclair, who was still in a daze. Guess what I brought for your grandpa for his 80th birthday? Finn Taylor pointed outside as he said that. Just then, Michael Sinclair heard the sound of drums. He rushed out, only to see a coffin being lifted in. It was naturally a sight to see a coffin being gifted to someone celebrating their 80th birthday. At that moment, all of the Sinclair family's guests were shell-shocked. How can that be? Who is the one who ordered this coffin? What were those men in black doing? What's going on with the Sinclair family? Finn Taylor, the old master is celebrating his 80th birthday, yet you sent a coffin. Do you really think you'd be able to do as you please just because you've defeated these men? You should know very well who wants you dead. Do you think you'll have a way out when the Walker family and Terra family want you dead? Louis Sinclair was watching from the top floor of the Sinclair family's residence as he lashed out at Finn Taylor. The way he saw it, the latter was just putting on an act. There were some mountains that others would never surpass. If the Walker family and the Terra family want you dead, you will face certain death no matter how capable you are. The Terra family, the Walker family, everyone present was dumbstruck by Louis Sinclair's words. The Terra family and Walker family are part of the 4 most prestigious families in New York, yet they're working together just to kill this man named Finn Taylor. Who is he? What has he done? But none of that matters. Just like what Louis Sinclair said, the result has already been decided. Hee. But Finn Taylor paid no heed to those words. What are you laughing at? Louis Sinclair wondered if the other's mind had gone blank out of fear. How could he be laughing when he's already at death's door? I'm laughing at you. You're such a short-sighted man. Is New York the only thing you can see? Is there nobody higher than the 4 families of New York? What you don't know is that the 4 families are just fish on a chopping board to me. I can kill them at any time. Of course, Finn Taylor's words came as a shock to the hundreds of people present. How could he say that about the 4 families? Isn't that ridiculing them? Does he have a death wish? Great, you're really bold, young man. You even dared to say such disrespectful things. You said that you could destroy the 4 families at any time you please. Do you know that the 4 families are all involved in today's mission? They've already surrounded us. Once I give my order, you can say goodbye to everyone here. Louis Sinclair's eyes were filled with murderous intent. If the Sinclair family wants to rise up and work with the 4 families, we have to give the 4 families a gift. This man in front of Muho looks down on the 4 families will be the perfect offering. Oh, is that so? Why don't you try giving that order then? Finn Taylor's gaze wasn't the slightest bit anxious and was instead full of confidence. Louis Sinclair frowned. Is he faking it, or is he for real? Why do I feel so uneasy? But he gave it some thought. I have the 4 families of New York backing me. What do I have to fear? All right, since you want to die, don't blame me for doing this. Louis Sinclair lit a firework that was next to him. Boom! The instant the firework burst out in the sky, countless men charged in and headed toward Finn Taylor. To Louis Sinclair, Finn Taylor was no different from a dead man. Seeing the strong forces surround the Sinclair family's residence from all sides, Louis Sinclair's heart leapt with joy. These are all men from the 4 families, yet they're all following my orders today. Having done this, I can now die with no regrets. Finn Taylor, you'd better get on your knees and beg for mercy. You're already at death's door. Louis Sinclair wanted to see Finn Taylor kneeling to him. He had no idea why the 4 families were so intent on killing the latter, but he could tell that the 4 families were terrified of him. Think of how amazing I'll be if I can get someone who even the 4 families fear to bow before me. But all Louis Sinclair saw was Finn Taylor shaking his head. Just then, the noises ceased. This meant that they had already arrived in the Sinclair family's residence. Louis Sinclair was even more excited. But the gate opened at that moment, and 4 people walked in with 4 others in their hands. Louis Sinclair stole a glance at them. He couldn't help but feel that those 4 people being dragged in seemed familiar. These 4 people were thrown before Finn Taylor, and they slowly lifted their heads. The latter merely waved to greet them. But the moment the 4 men lifted their heads, Louis Sinclair jolted out of his seat. The Sinclair family's guests were overwhelmed with emotions. Those are none other than the heads of the 4 most prominent families in New York. They're all well-known figures in New York, yet they're being treated no different from clowns now and are being carelessly thrown around. Long time no see, Pierre Terra. The Terra family head Pierre Terra was in a frenzy. As for the other 3, they were doing no better. They knew that there were only 2 outcomes to betraying Finn Taylor. They would either win or die. Young master, I was wrong. I was really wrong. It wasn't just Pierre Terra. Even the other 3 heads immediately kowtowed before Finn Taylor. They could feel horror rising up in their hearts, yet Master Peregrine ignored them and simply turned to Louis Sinclair, who was still upstairs. What did you say? I didn't hear you well just now. Louis Sinclair spat out a mouthful of blood. How could I be losing? I have the 4 families of New York backing me. Logically speaking, only Finn Taylor should be driven to death. Why am I the one going to die? Louis Sinclair, I told you that I'd spare Ava Duncan's life. I still stand by that, but I have one condition. You have to jump down from there. He was forcing the other to commit suicide at his 80th birthday party. Nobody knew just how aghast and uneasy Louis Sinclair felt inwardly. But do I have another choice? PFF'd. He spat out yet another mouthful of fresh red blood. Then, he jumped off the building. The chapters is up by N0VE Iban. Dad, Grandpa, Michael Sinclair and his father were crestfallen to see the old master jump to his own death. I'll fight it out with you. Michael Sinclair cast all his worries aside and rushed up toward Master Peregrine. Of course, the latter couldn't be bothered with such a small fly. There would naturally be someone who would take care of that for him. Snap! Wampus charged forward and snapped Michael Sinclair's neck with a single arm. Master Peregrine, Wampus was asking for Finn Taylor's advice. Kill him, that was all Finn Taylor said. Crack! Wampus exerted some force, and Michael Sinclair drew his last breath. Clean this place up. After uttering those 4 words, Master Peregrine headed for the garden to look for his wife and her best friend. Are they still there? With Finn Taylor's order, the 4 guardians led nobody off. The 4 families of New York had only formed because the 14-year-old Finn Taylor had let them do so. Comparing them to the current Finn Taylor was like comparing the light of fireflies to the glow of the moon. There was no way the 4 families could be Finn Taylor's match even after forming an alliance. Their actions were like child's play to the latter. Of course, the Sinclair family was even more ridiculous. After arriving at the garden, Finn Taylor smiled and said, You can open your eyes now." It was only then that the two friends opened their eyes. Seeing that Finn Taylor was safe and sound, they were both relieved. "Are you all right?" The best friends still thought that this had simply been a conflict between Michael Sinclair and Finn Taylor. "I'm fine, let's go." Finn Taylor took the pair and led them through another path, avoiding all the other guests. This incident with the Sinclair family hadn't affected Finn Taylor the slightest bit. He believed that the four guardians would naturally take good care of it. If they couldn't even handle such a trivial matter, they weren't fit to be the four guardians of Peregrine Hall. With that, Finn Taylor brought the pair back to San Francisco. Along the way back, Finn Taylor gazed at the horizon. The four families of New York weren't even a threat to him, but he thought of someone. His younger brother, Donovan Taylorwo, was his arch-enemy. Where is he? Why did he suddenly disappear? How will my life change once he returns? Actually, Master Peregrine had already instructed the four guardians to investigate Donovan Taylor and find his whereabouts. Unfortunately, their searches had been in vain. Upon returning to San Francisco, Finn Taylor brought his wife to the Larson family's ancestral shrine right away. She was confused as to why her husband had done so. But as soon as they entered the shrine, her husband pulled Harold Larson's photo. Then, he poured gasoline all over it before taking out a lighter. Yvette Larson asked hesitantly, "Finn, what are you doing? Will you believe me if I said that I'm going to burn this photo?" Huh, Yvette Larson was slightly stunned by his words. Harold Larson is Grandpa's biological younger brother. Finn will definitely cause an uproar in the Larson family if he burns this photo. To tell the truth, Finn Taylor was only saying that to summon the entire Larson family. He knew that this would do it. As expected, he heard footsteps rushing to the ancestral shrine. The ones who had arrived first were none other than the detestable Quince Larson and Eleanor Larson. "Yvette Larson, your husband must be mad. How could he threaten to burn great-uncle's portrait? Why aren't you even trying to stop him? Do you really want to be a traitor of our family?" Finn Taylor looked up at Quince Larson, feeling as though he was looking at a dumb pig. "Harold Larson's descendant Heather Larson wanted to kill me. I'm simply trying to summon all of Harold Larson's descendants by doing this, yet Quince Larson is mocking me and putting me down. What is he if not a dumb pig? Quince Larson, you'll regret your words." He sneered. "Regret? If I regret my words, I'll kneel down and lick your shoes. Wait for next part."